Hello, good morning. I'm Alex. I'm from the United States, fighting through some jet lag this morning, but not too bad. So I'm going to talk about content strategy today. Are you guys familiar with HubSpot? Yeah. So HubSpot's one of those prime examples of a company built on the back of content marketing, or as HubSpot coined, inbound marketing. But before that, I was at a startup called Lawn Starter, and then also another startup called Conversion XL, and both of those companies were built on content marketing as well. So my whole career, whether big company or small company, every company sort of leveraged content as a tool for growth. Just like to get the lay of the land, would you say on like a scale, who here is like more on the beginner side of content marketing? And then who's more on like the advanced, like I've done this before, like I know what I'm doing. So pretty evenly split. And then that's good though. This stuff's applicable, like I said, for companies of all sizes. And then who's more at like a startup or like a smaller business or entrepreneur? So, roughly half again. Yeah, okay, cool. So this is perfect. We'll get some mixture in the conversation. So let me do presenter mode real quick. Oh, and also, I've got these slides set up and like a whole walkthrough on the framework. This is basically what I would do if I were starting out as like a consultant with a content agency working on a client's website, or if I was starting a company. This is the step-by-step kind of framework I would go through to build a content strategy. So there's that, it's kind of the theory side, but I also want to make this a discussion, so there's time for like questions and all that stuff, and we can debate and discuss and clarify things. And then I'm also leaving it open where there's a lot of tool usage in this, so I'm talking about tools like Ahrefs and Google Analytics and Google Search Console, so I can actually show you guys what I mean instead of just static slides, which get a little academic and kind of flat. So we've got whole breaks where we can go in and like hash these things out. So the outline today is basically, I guess there's a lot of battle metaphors and war metaphors. It's like preparing for battle, the general strategy on how to beat Goliath and how to basically build and leverage content as a tool for growth. So this will include basic things like buyer personas, which I think is a pretty familiar tool regardless of what part of marketing or UX you're in. Just a tool for making decisions and getting to know the customer better. And then how to leverage the linkerati, which is an interesting term, and then influencers. And then using SWOT analysis and other tools to basically build your strategy and find out what your strengths are. We'll move into the economics of content marketing, how you can make it work, whether you're a startup who has very little resources or whether you're a big company like HubSpot and we can hire a whole team of writers and strategists and freelancers and basically just like produce tons of content. Either way works. And then the content planning and content creation part is really the playbook from scratch, if you will. So that'll walk through very tactically how to use all these tools. And we can customize that, so you can ask me. We can actually come up with a case study or something in the moment where we like build a playbook for a company that exists already or something. So to start, buyer personas. Has everybody heard of buyer personas? Okay, so that's a real common one at this point. Basically, who's going to buy your product and how do they learn about the product or service? Oh yeah, is this better?
Much better.
I was going to have to shout otherwise. Yeah, so how can you leverage content to reach these people? I like to start with a definition, just get everybody on the same page with regards to buyer personas. So they are fictional representations and generalizations of a cluster of your target users who exhibit similar attitudes, goals, and behaviors in relation to your product. Key components of this. Should I stand up? I don't know. Fictional representations. So it's not necessarily a very specific person. It's not like you take like a target person from your customer base and say like, this is our persona. So it's something fictional, it's made up, but it's a representation based on actual data. And it's a cluster of your target users. So again, it's not just one person that you identify and say like, this is our ideal customer. It's really like a couple characteristics that you can cluster together and group people into a category for simplicity's sake. So you can actually make decisions based on that. And this is the important part that I feel like most buyer personas do wrong, is it's got to be in relation to your product or service or business. So a lot of the times we get these goofy personas like ambitious Alex who likes the color blue and like he's 26 through 35. And it's like this ridiculous thing where you can't actually use that to like inform any of your marketing or product decisions. So the why of using personas, obviously content marketing, that's the whole talk today. But then there's more. It's basically like you have all these quantitative and qualitative insights that all of your teams at your company are probably gathering. So whether you're doing customer interviews, which the next workshop will cover, whether you're doing A/B testing, any of that stuff, it lives in these pools within your company, and personas can actually create a way to operationalize that for any team. So it gives you a model that you can actually take that data and use it to inform different campaigns. Craft better messaging, write blog posts better, do landing pages better. Essentially, the essence of a persona is it gives you a tool that you can use to get to know your customer better and use that to inform marketing and product decisions. Mistakes with these are basically, we covered this, like, doing those BS kind of things like, oh, his favorite color is blue, or he likes fast cars, or something like that doesn't have anything to do with the business. Making up facts, so that was where we came from before with the definition, where it's a representation of your actual customers. So if you don't have a piece of data, inferring something that doesn't actually exist is not a very good way to lead into product decisions. And then making them too detailed or granular or too simplistic or vague is also a bad thing. We basically want a usable model that's somewhat accurate. So I found this online. This is from, I believe, NN Group, which is like a UX company. And this, I think there's a lot of cool things about this. Basically, it shows how Jade, the emerging creative, buys things, her needs on speed, adaptability, all that stuff. So when you're creating content, you can sort of use those things to like inform you on how you talk about your products and like what level of complexity, what features to sort of emphasize, what things to de-emphasize, and more. This is a bad persona, right? So it doesn't matter that I'm 25 to 35. Like, that doesn't have anything to do with how I'm buying things. I enjoy extreme sports, that's true, but if I'm selling organic tea, that doesn't really matter to me. AirPods owner, again, it's like irrelevant data. So basically that's a goofy one. So real quick, I mean, personas are one of those core kind of competencies that we have to talk about anything related to marketing, and especially content. So I want to open it up here and ask you guys what you think about personas. Does anybody hate personas and think they're a bad idea? Does anybody love personas? And does anybody have like a really cool use case that you've used them for outside of content?
Yeah, we do buy personas through customer development interviews, so we kind of update them like once a year when we're going up market, and we do use them for our interviews, especially we have like a main buyer persona and then a couple of secondary ones that we also want to target. So this specific content is actually designed for those secondary buyer personas, because the main one is kind of broad and we have like a lot of keywords running for. But we do use them for creating super specific like posts and articles for super specific use cases, and it helps.
That's really cool. So why don't you use the main persona for your content?
We do use it, but it's like more broad, so I wouldn't say we're using it very, very specifically. We just try to appeal to their motivation and so on and so forth, but it's like too broad to get anything to like target 100%. So we need to actually create a cluster of content to cover.
That's really interesting. So the main one's going to be like a more broad umbrella that fits most of your like target audience, and then the smaller clusters are going to be more specific and actionable. Very cool. Any other questions with personas?
Can I share? I just cannot keep silence.
100%.
I have so much pain with it. So I have an experience working with both B2B and B2C spaces, and it's so much better and easier to work with personas with B2B products. Like, I even give names to them. Like, I call them, treat them like real people. But they're fictional, right? But we imagine them as real people. And for B2B space, you just give the characteristics, and even age works. In B2C space, like whatever persona type we come up with, just either we're doing something wrong or it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I've never noticed a difference between the two models, B2C or B2B, but I have noticed that the coming up with names and all that stuff, like that's been a frustration of mine, where it's like we're recording this, don't show it to HubSpot. At HubSpot, we have personas, and they're these goofy ones like Growth Gary and Marketing Mary and stuff like that. And I asked about that, like when we came in, I'm like, where did we, like who are these people? And they're like, oh, I mean, we just came up with them. Like Marketing Mary cares about like managing a department, and Growth Gary likes tinkering. And I'm like, but did you like find that in the data anywhere? And they didn't. So it was like this generalized thing. And I think that's probably the case with B2C or B2B. If it's generalized and not necessarily based on like your customer data set, then it's going to be misleading. And I think that probably happens more often in B2C just because the market's broader. Like your buyer in B2B is usually very defined, whereas like...
Exactly, because I have like in B2B CEO, the department manager, and then the developer within this department or marketer within this department. And you can apply very specific characteristics to all of them. And when you target broader, you just don't know like what would be the generalized
right.
criteria for this or that type of persona.
So
like
you know in B2B exactly.
With airports and winter sports and whatever, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, a good example is something like if you're selling tea or snowboards or something like that. It doesn't matter what your title is. It doesn't matter like how old you are. You could be a buyer of that product. But in a B2B space, if you are buying A/B testing software, you know that the buyer is going to be a director of CRO or a director of marketing or something like that. So you can hone in and then you can create that name like Director of Marketing Mary or something like that. So yeah, I think it depends on like what you're selling and how broad the actual thing is. But yeah, the one thing I would just, as an actionable tip, is just like not make it too broad that it's unusable. Because we're basically using these as a model to create content and answer questions. Basically, if you're talking to directors or executives or something like that, you want to go, generally speaking, more high level and talk about the business ROI. But if you're selling like, if you're data camp and you're talking about like beginner programmers, you want to talk about the end user, and you're just using these to make decisions, you know, and create copy and content and all that stuff. Okay, cool. I also, so part of this is I put homework sections, and we don't have to do this live. I think that gets a little chaotic, but I wanted there to be some sort of takeaway for when you guys go back to your companies and like you actually want to put some of this into action. So I built little roadmaps based on like how I would do personas, and this is like a real nitty gritty kind of like thing. So this is just, we can come back to it later if you want. You can ask questions about that, but I'm sure we'll send the slides out, and yeah, I can like email you this. All right, so the next piece that I wanted to talk about in content is we have our buyer personas, which is our customer. That's who we want to sell to, but that's not often who we talk to in content marketing, which is another common misperception. It's like we're writing to our customers. It's not always the case. Our customers aren't always searching for the terms that are the highest traffic volume. They're not always sharing the articles that get the most social shares. And there's aspects to content marketing where you actually want to reach the influencers who then talk to your customers. It's sort of a secondary approach. So the linkerati is a cool term. It's like, I think Moz came up with this. It's basically in content and SEO, the elite group of influencers who hold the keys to giving you high-powered backlinks, which helps your SEO and your site authority. And then influencers, of course, if you're in B2C or something like that, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who can give you a backlink. It could be just somebody who, let's say, are selling an organic meat subscription box. It could be like those paleo bloggers, right? It's somebody who has the ears of your audience and like the power to influence them and like make buying decisions easier for them. So yeah, in my world, the linkerati is basically who we write to. So we're often hoping to reach eventual users, but we're not necessarily writing like how to buy marketing automation software or like how to build a form or something like that. We're doing bigger pieces on things like the state of inbound marketing in 2019 or how to optimize and design forms. And those are articles that actually appeal to the linkerati. So this is people who can help you build backlinks. This is, you know, bloggers at Unbounce and other websites and entrepreneur.com. And we can write content that appeals to those people as well as our customers. And it's sort of this roundabout strategy to like building our website authority, which, as I'll talk about later, helps you rank those bottom of the funnel pieces that your customers actually care about and you can actually get customers from. So yeah, again, I touched on this, but this matters because this is the typical buyer's journey. So we have usually, generally speaking, we start with awareness level content. Starts out at a high level, brings people in with very generic terms. So it'd be something like, let's say we're selling customer feedback software. This would be something like, what is customer satisfaction, or how to reduce customer churn. Then you move down that pathway into like consideration, where people start to understand what solutions are out there on the market, and they start to compare them and start to build a landscape of different possible solutions, products, services. And then the decision stage is when they're comparing, making pros and cons lists, charts, doing the rational buying process that most buyers should do. So I guess an example that I'll come up with here, I just bought this ring. It tracks your sleep, but it took me a long time to buy it because I didn't know it existed. That's not something you wake up one day and you're like, I need a sleep ring. Nobody knows what a sleep ring is. So a long time ago, I realized that I didn't sleep very well. I'm like, oh man, I wake up through the night, have trouble getting to sleep. So I would read books, blog posts, just generally search for things like that. Like, oh, how do I sleep better? Like, how do I wake up feeling more energized? Stuff like that. And then after a while, you start to do enough research where you start to realize there's things out there like melatonin, there's supplements, there's different mattresses. And like you start to build this like general landscape of all the different possible solutions to your problem, which is sleep. And then you're kind of in the consideration stage then. You're like, I know I want some sort of solution to my problem. I don't know particularly what yet. And then I started to search with these sleep trackers that basically show you what kind of a night's sleep you get, how to improve it and all that stuff. And then this was my last stage where I started searching things like Aura Ring reviews and Aura Ring versus Motive Ring and very, very decision level stuff where I was basically on the edge of purchasing or not. So we all go through this buyer's journey when we're purchasing something. For some products, it's more apparent than others. The higher the consideration and the more complex the product, the longer the buyer's journey. Sometimes you just know you need, I don't know, a toothbrush and you just go to the store and pick up a toothbrush. But oftentimes online, this buyer's journey is very apparent. So I bring up the buyer's journey because, as we talked about with the linkerati and personas, usually the top level is about getting links and attention and traffic and building authority. So this is the stage that we're actually writing for the linkerati and the influencers. This is something that not a lot of content marketing experts talk about. Usually it's this generalizable strategy where you're just writing for your customers and what they care about. It's not actually true. This is the point where you want to actually like work on getting backlinks and getting shares and getting like a broader net. So this awareness level content, back to the sleep ring thing, is going to be interesting studies on sleep or a survey of the United States and like sleep habits or something like that, because then other websites can pick that up, link to it, and then maybe your customers will see it through that. Or your website will just build its website authority up so you can start to rank for terms like sleep tracker ring and stuff like that that very few people will actually search for, which is the decision stage. So it's basically like that's the stage where you capture the demand that you've built through the top level awareness content and you get customers and you're leveraging the authority that you've built through those more nebulous high level awareness pieces that don't bring in the customers. So at HubSpot, here's an example. I actually mentioned this, yeah. So we have a customer feedback product, but there's like 100 or 500 search volume per month. It's not an incredible number. And again, nobody wakes up one day and they're like, I need a feedback tool to survey my customers. You kind of like start out by saying like, I need to learn about what my customers want, or like I need to reduce customer churn, or some sort of high level problem. So we built this playbook and we started out with this massive pillar page where it's like the only guide you'll ever need to customer feedback strategy. That gets like 5,000 searches a month, but it's also like got a ton of backlinks and people in the industry share it. We go down the pathway and we're looking more at the consideration. So then people start to think like, oh, I need some solution to like collect tickets or feedback or something like that. And then the decision level content, as I said, is this versus that, HubSpot versus Marketo, Aura Ring versus Motive Ring, Alpha Brain reviews. Basically, when you're on the cusp of making that decision, how do you nudge that customer just a little bit further? How do you use content to like push them towards your product versus other ones? Because they comparison shop. A cool example of this one actually is that we wrote a bunch of comparison pages. So that first ranked result is actually a HubSpot.com Marketo versus HubSpot. So we own that conversation too, which is really cool. All right, so a lot of talking on my part. Discussion and homework. So does anybody here have an interesting example of like who the influencers and linkerati are in their industry and if they're different than your customers? So like I think, oh yeah.
I'm sorry, but
No.
we do have it. We actually target link writers through expert roundup posts. So we actually guarantee to get them to share the links because they kind of participate. And yes, they're totally different from our buyer personas. They're both in the sales industry, but we're targeting sales experts, consultants, super influencers, and our customers will like more sales managers and SDRs. So that's a huge difference.
What is your exact product, or like what? It's in the sales space.
Yeah, it's a sales automation software. It's reply.io, so kind of like
Reply.io?
Yeah.
Oh, no way. I used to use that. Well, I mean, I'm at HubSpot now, so I have to use HubSpot sales, but
Yeah, sure.
I love Reply.io. That's a great example. So my roommate works at Mailshake, if you're familiar. It's Sujin Patel's product. So they have the same problem where a lot of salespeople don't read content. Like it's just like, that's a good insight from a buyer persona building process is like salespeople don't read blogs. So how do you reach them? Well, they follow the people that do read blogs. So it's like the influencers and the people who appear on podcasts and speak at conferences. So I think that's a really cool example of like, if you wrote 1 million blog posts about like how to run better sales meetings or like how to set up more demos or something like that, you're just never going to get the quantity of salespeople that could be your customers reading it. So that's a fantastic example. I saw another
I
one.
have a question. Like about defining those people. Like, okay, I have some customer interviews, and it's really hard to define what are those influencers that have interaction. So how do you identify those people you want to target, like influencers?
Yeah, so my favorite way, I'll actually, if you guys want, I can send a template out for how I do my persona surveys. One of the questions I always ask when I'm building buyer personas is what content they consume or like what inspires them or who they follow. And essentially if I see the same names repeated multiple times, and there's actually an interesting thing is you might find there's different personas that read different things. So when I was at Conversion XL, we were building our personas for the Institute, which is a training program for data-driven marketers and analysts. And we found out that our core persona, the one who represented most of our customer base, read things like Conversion XL, they read things like Unbounce's blog, and they were really caught up in the market. They went to a lot of conferences, but they didn't actually spend that much money. They were the end user. So it was basically they had to go get permission, or maybe they would buy one course out of pocket. But they were less, I guess, valuable as a business persona, but they were more represented because we ran our blog and like we operated in that space. So then we found out there was this whole second persona of like digital marketing managers and like people who ran programs and like had teams, and they didn't read any of those blogs. They barely knew Conversion XL was a blog, which that was our main kind of thing. But they would read reports from Forrester and they would read like, state of the industry things. So we started to do more of those and partner with companies like, we didn't do Forrester, but we partnered with Sentient Ascend to build like white papers. But we found that out through the interview process, and I would actually like get on calls after that with like representatives from that buyer persona cluster and basically ask like what leads you to make decisions? What do you look at before you buy a product like this, and try to find commonly repeated answers. Sometimes they're super clear, sometimes it's like if you're selling something in the paleo space, you'll hear the same names over and over, so you're like, oh, how do I work with Mark Sisson or something like that? And sometimes it's more obscure. Sometimes it's like, well, I do an ROI analysis and I like, talk to multiple stakeholders in the industry, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, oh, okay, cool. So this is like a very logic-based thing, and we should build white papers and like very like logic-based materials with trustworthy people in the space, as opposed to writing blogs about how to do conversion optimization. So that's kind of a roundabout answer to say talk to your customers, but it's all through the interview process. And I wouldn't be surprised if you have different personas that have different answers.
Sure. I have some answers from my from interviews. I know that what influences the decision making, like how it looks like, but still I don't get any valuable information regarding these mediums they use, like people they follow. It's really hard to get this information, and they don't actually scout exact names.
Interesting. Do you know how you generally acquire customers to your website then at this point? Like, is it through organic search? Is it through referral?
Organic, yeah.
Okay, so you're doing blogging then?
Yeah, I do, but I think the And kind of weird process. It's not that much of a controller still, but some of it goes through blogging. Yeah, I have blog and leverage Quora for it, and some traffic goes from Quora.
Oh, interesting.
Blog, and then people convert. So kind of we are working in chatbot space, chatbots and AI space. So some training articles is more about you.
So yeah, I kind of know that space a little bit. HubSpot acquired the chatbot builder, Motion.ai. So I know there's search volume for some of those terms, like best AI chatbot builder. So I would maybe talk to companies like HubSpot that are writing listicles like that and see how you can get on those lists. I don't know what exact product you build, but if it's a chatbot like that, there seems to be a lot of actually low funnel, bottom funnel content that's going out there for people looking specifically for those things. But for the linkerati, for the influencers, there's a couple people in that space. I can't remember. I went to a conference recently where a woman was a CMO of a chatbot company. I can't remember who it was. But yeah, they're speaking at conferences, like big marketing events now. So those people exist, and I think people do trust them. And then there's probably industry publications for chatbots, and like.
Yeah, sure. So basically, you can start with influencers in your niche and just hope that people you are targeting see. Yeah.
You also have to worry about, so in a space like that where I know there's search volume for the terms that are like decision level stuff, best AI chatbot builder, you have to worry about building up your website domain authority to the point that you can rank for those terms. So identifying high domain authority, well-established, trustworthy sites in that space and partnering with them to do guest posts and link building and content can help raise the relevance and like authority of your website. So when it comes time to rank for that like product page or the best chatbot builders, like bottom funnel stuff, your site will have the authority to basically do that. So I would identify basically, first off, word of mouth, what do people trust? And second off, like how much authority do those websites actually have to help you rank, and like what's their actual reach?
Okay.
And then, anybody else on influencers, linkerati? That's kind of it's very industry specific, and it requires a lot of, I guess, domain expertise in your specific space. Oh, I actually did homework for this. Oh yeah, I answered the question on my homework part. Yeah, so make a list of the top blogs in your niche, just like off the top of your head. Like what would you read if you were doing research for blog posts on your topic? The top conferences in your space, the most influential people in your space. And then like the second piece is seeing what kind of content they share and link to. So like that basically gives you the answer as to like what kind of content you should start creating. Do they care about listicles, in-depth research, all that stuff? And you can just look at their Twitter feed too. Actually, are you guys familiar with BuzzSumo? Everybody's used that? All right, cool. I'm just gonna like show real quick just to walk through that, how we would do that. I think this will work. What kind of company should I use as like a example here? What are we selling? Beer. Craft beer, I assume. The bad stuff. So there's tons of tools on this product, but you can search bios or content shared. So like, let's just use craft beer. There's probably a ton of influencers out there. So yeah, this would be like a short list of people that could be interesting. Obviously there's a bunch of breweries here, but you want to filter out for, this guy's probably a big influencer. Yeah, and then you can just go click through on their Twitter feed and see what kind of stuff they share. Yeah, then that gives you kind of a really good example of what kind of content you could create that could be interesting to the people who matter to your customers. If that makes sense, we'll move on here. And then the third piece of our core foundational strategy is something that I'm guessing everybody has done or knows about, the SWOT analysis. The very typical business school strategy thing, which is really boring until you start to actually put it to use. Like that's something that I remember studying in like business classes and being like, this is so theoretical and academic. But it's actually the core piece of how I operate in terms of the content marketing strategy. Because if you're at a startup, you don't have the same strengths and weaknesses that a big company has, and you don't have the same opportunities therefore. And like I think that marketing and content marketing in specific, if I could sum up a key like a core strategic component. It's basically finding your strategic edge and exploiting it as much as you can before any competitors can catch up. So it's like HubSpot has the resources, time, and effort to basically publish everything we want and hit all the keywords we can. So it's sort of this like carpet bomb strategy where we're just going as broadly as we can. And then there's other companies that are upstarts, like let's say Intercom, when they first started their blog, they had sort of a famous product founder, like a product-based guy, and they wrote very, very like domain-specific content that like nitty-gritty like product nerds would go to and read their blog. Hugely different strategies, both work really well. So knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are actually like informs the basis of your core like strategy. This is what it looks like. Obviously it's the quadrants, right? Strengths align with opportunities, weaknesses with threats. And I did kind of a mock-up just for HubSpot, just to illustrate super quickly. Our core strengths, we have a super high domain authority. We can write any post we want, basically rank within a week or two. A team of well-trained writers and also a process to train new ones. So we can basically hire and we have all the resources we want, plus a top-notch SEO team working with us and a recognizable brand. The weaknesses are actually bigger than you would think. We have multiple product suites that create confusion. So essentially everybody who comes to HubSpot's site, or if I asked you like what HubSpot did, like everybody would say marketing automation, right? But how many would say you're a help desk software or like a live chat software? Because we have those tools. So it's like, how do we prioritize those things and also still maintain like that brand salience of being a marketing automation leader? That's a key problem that we have. And then because we're a big publicly traded company, people don't like to see you make risky bets. So essentially we can't try anything too crazy, which limits us a lot in the long run because there's other startups that can try really crazy stuff and kind of outpace us in that area. And then opportunities, it's like anything that we're not doing that we currently could be that align with those strengths. So because we have a domain authority of 100, or whatever it is, and highly trained writers, we can create templatized bottom of the funnel content like nothing. So we have all these best of terms, and actually that aligns with the product suite thing where we have a million different products. We can create like 150 pieces of content for like best live chat software, best sales automation software, and all these things and rank really quickly, which is something that I'm currently working on. So that's a key thing there. But yeah, and then threats, it's like, what do we look for? It's like influential product thought leadership publications. So something like Intercom is something that totally steals thunder from us. It's like, it's hard for us to compete with that because we can't take those big risks as easily. So when somebody who is a bit more of an advanced user wants good content, again, don't send this to HubSpot, please. They're going to choose Intercom like every time because we write the basic stuff. It's more for beginners. It's going to be really hard for us to get this turn off. Hello? Oh, back on. Hard for us to get like very advanced users essentially. And if you're a new SaaS startup, you have all these strengths that nobody looks at. You're basically scrappy and willing out to try a bunch of different promotion techniques and strategy techniques that big companies won't do. So you can basically be innovative and scrappy and a little, I don't want to say black hat, but you can try stuff that a big company wouldn't. Let's say you have an influential founder in your industry, that opens up all kinds of opportunities for partnerships and thought leadership and getting on Hacker News and stuff like that. And your founder has the time to actually like invest in those things. Brian Halligan is not going to come down and like work with the content team for a lot of that stuff. It's just not, at a public company, that's not going to happen. Weaknesses, of course, you don't have the domain authority, you don't have the brand awareness, you don't have the resources that HubSpot or a big company has. But you look into like your opportunities therefore and you say like, all right, we've got a thought leader, we've got a founder that actually like people trust, so we can leverage that to come in at the flank of a big company who doesn't have that. We can create movement-first content. Basically, that's what Drift did, right? So there's this whole space they carved out for conversational marketing and conversational landing pages, which is just like a product with a chatbot on it. But now everybody's talking about conversational marketing, and it's this whole movement. And they basically carved that out because they had a very influential founder, product-based founder that people trusted, and they were able to basically move in very quickly with not the same level of like domain authority and resources as HubSpot, but now they've got a whole space carved out for them. So again, two different strategies. They both worked very well, but it's all about like knowing and understanding who you are in relation to that space and what kind of line you can exploit in order to like beat out your competitors or differentiate. Basically, you don't want to like go up against a big competitor and try the exact same strategy that they're doing. It's just never going to work, right? They have like all the time in the world and the resources. So that was the business strategy section. That was a little dense. Any comments or like questions on that part, like with SWOT analysis, particularly in relation to content marketing? Has anybody done one of those before for content? No? What constitutes like a strength in content marketing? What do you think is like a hidden strength for a startup? Low cost? So if you have like an enterprise player and you can come in at a lower cost, you can basically lower the friction points to conversion? That makes sense. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
I guess it's also the opportunity to use your startup journey for content to acquire, like Groove did, for example, Groove HQ.
Groove?
So they kind of use their being a startup and having the startup journey to attract a lot of audience to their blog, and this is one of the strengths, I guess.
Yeah, I love that idea. So I think that's especially pertinent because they knew their customer was a startup. So somebody who is a startup and wants to learn about the tools that make a successful startup work is going to come to the Groove blog then to learn about being a startup, which of course, when they're looking for a help desk software, who do they turn to? So I think that's a brilliant example actually. So yeah, I'm always looking at innovative approaches like that and thinking like, what's the logic behind this? Why is First Round Review doing these like in-depth like New Yorker style interviews? Like why does that work for them? Whereas HubSpot writes these like, what is Instagram marketing posts, and that works for us, and like what's the difference? So I think just having an open mind and like trying to figure out like why, like what's the why behind the strategy, because there's so many ways to make content work. It's just about like finding your edge and exploiting it as much as you can. So moving on from that, and this is kind of related. This is an idea that I've been burning for a little bit now, but content economics. Essentially, I was really angry at Roundup posts, sorry. But I was like, why the hell are there so many Roundup posts at this point? Like, why are there so many listicles and just like kind of cheap content, right? Like things that are pretty easy to produce. And like, then on the other end, I'm like, does expensive content work? Like First Round Review, to reach out to like the VP of growth at Duolingo and do an in-depth interview and like polish it up and like basically do like New Yorker style editing, like that is just an expensive piece of content. What are the returns on that? And why would you choose that versus like cheap content if you can produce it at scale? So I thought about that in terms of like this landscape of content that you create. So cheapness doesn't necessarily have to be actual costs, right? Of course there's costs if you like hire freelance writers or content marketers. That's like an objective thing. There's also things that take time and effort and actually have like reputational costs. So on the spectrum of this, we can look at roundups and listicles and teardowns as pretty cheap and easy for anybody to produce, right? You don't need like a lot of domain expertise. You could bring in writers that can produce those fairly easily and templatized. And then you have these other things like research studies, which are going to get poked through. They're expensive to produce. We did those at CXL Institute. We actually like bought like a UX lab and produced like original studies. Spoiler alert, they didn't do that great, so our return was not great. But essentially there's this whole spectrum. And I also look at it as like the more expensive the content, the less competition. This is a terrible graph, by the way, it looks bad. But I don't know why I made the arrow go down. In retrospect, it's a silly decision. There's more competition, the cheaper the content, because there's a lower barrier to entry. So essentially, if you're starting out, anybody can write a roundup. You just reach out to, I mean, you got to get the right influencers and the right curation, but it doesn't take years of experience to be able to do one of those. Whereas if you write a well-researched business book, or like Groove did, like a personal recap on their own journey, it's the piece of content is actually as expensive as their whole journey. So they put in 5 years to write that post. So basically nobody can replicate that, and there's no competition that can actually create the same piece of content. So when I look at that, it tells me that if you are a startup, you need to invest in expensive content, because at that point you care about differentiation and avoiding competition. Whereas once you're a big company or scaling or have some sort of repeatable framework that you can make cheaper content work, there's actually no reason other than building a long-term moat to create content that is more expensive than it needs to be. So does that make sense? If you can get by and rank number one for an article that costs you $100, why would you spend $1,000? That's content economics, and it's another thing that not a lot of people really talk about. They just think, oh, we ranked number one, but it's like, what was the ROI and like what was the actual cost of that, and could it have been lower? Because the lower it is, the more you can invest in more content, and it's actually an opportunity cost if you're spending too much at a certain point. Yeah.
How are you able to measure like the reputational costs? Because in certain industries, like newspapers or something, where the cost of getting someone that's highly qualified to write for your publication might increase the reputation of your newspaper, or if you're the leading authority, you want people to continue to see you as the leading authority.
Yeah.
How can you kind of mix that into your ROI and decide if the reputational cost makes economic sense for you?
So I actually don't know an objective answer to that, but that's actually a really good example, and that's why I mentioned reputational costs. Is I came from the CRO space and worked for Conversion XL with Pep Laya, who's the founder, who has just years of experience doing this stuff. And I saw that he would be mentioned on the same roundup post as somebody who has never run an A/B test. And I was thinking about like the reputational cost if Pep gets something wrong when he writes a blog post versus like a freelance writer who's never run an A/B test. And I was thinking that it's mostly upside for the freelance writer and it's mostly downside for Pep. Although if he keeps producing stuff like that, he builds that trustworthiness, and that actually ended up defining the brand. So it's very nebulous. I would say there's not a good objective way to measure that cost and like the ROI on it. But I will say that at CXL, when we would write a bad post, we would get flamed over it. Like people would just roast us. We got so many emails if we got little statistics wrong, where it sort of became a brand differentiator. And I think that existed because the whole CRO space was filled with bad advice, that I think people actually can, and we saw this in direct traffic. That may actually be a good indicator, is like how much direct traffic are you getting, and is that increasing? Because our brand was actually like built upon that tenet of we don't put out BS. So that's, I guess, like the New York Times and companies like that. You go to them not because you're finding them in search results, but because you trust them implicitly. So in that case, you sort of like pigeonhole yourself into having to create expensive content with like reputable people and costly error checking and fact checking and all that stuff. But for me, it's one of those things where it's like that's a strategic decision and it's pretty difficult to quantitatively measure it. But you'll know once people come to you and they're like, we trust your brand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Somewhat of a cop-out answer with the actual ROI calculation, but yeah, that's something that I've thought a lot about, but not necessarily. I've never been able to put a number on it. Yeah, so this leads us with the expensive content versus cheap thing. I think that in any startup's journey, this is a graphic I took from a different blog post, atrium.co. Fantastic post on startup SEO and why it differs so much from enterprise. And basically, like as you start out, you don't have the domain authority to rank for things, and you can't really compete with like, if you're building a marketing automation platform, you just can't compete with HubSpot in terms of like writing the same article and having it be ranked. A 2,000 word post on that news site is not going to rank. The HubSpot one will. So what you have to do at the beginning is pour sweat equity in and basically produce the most expensive, amazing content possible, trustworthy stuff, industry expertise, 5,000 word articles that take a long time so you can really build up the authority and credibility and start ranking those pieces. But as you move through that journey, the goal is actually to reduce the cost of content. So once your domain authority goes from 20 to 50 and 50 to 70 and then up to the top, you can start to do templated content. So it's like HubSpot is now probably at the point where we're between templated and user-generated content and being able to like rank that stuff. So now instead of writing expensive pieces on like the state of inbound marketing, we can write, best of listicles. That's one product-based thing we're doing. But we can basically write what is Instagram marketing, what is Facebook marketing posts per days, and just rank those. And then the top point is basically the user-generated and scalable optimization. So you look at companies like Pinterest and Airbnb and Booking.com, and they're not even creating their own content. What they're doing is sitting back, waiting for like people, they're programmatically creating landing pages, and there's user-generated reviews. And then what they're doing is basically optimizing that to like rank and testing things like title tags and architecture and experience. So that's like the sort of endpoint in like the startup to enterprise customer journey with SEO, is you want to get to the point where you do the least amount of bespoke effort and like you have to invest the least into each individual piece of content in order for it to bring you results. And I created a much worse looking graphic. So it's like the quality that you need to rank decreases and levels off at a certain point as your domain authority rises. So at a domain authority of 20, when you've got 10 backlinks pointing to your site, you have to create really high level shit or like high quality stuff. And then as your domain authority increases to like Unbounce, HubSpot, entrepreneur.com level, you can write pretty garbage stuff and make it rank. It just becomes easier and easier. And then, yeah, basically the effectiveness of your templated content and user-generated stuff as you increase domain authority expands exponentially. So when you're first starting out, if your idea for SEO and content strategy is to get user-generated reviews and rank those pages, it's simply not going to work. And that's why we go back to the point of needing to appeal to the linkerati and the influencers to build up that authority so we can start to rank the templated stuff. So this is the kind of stuff that I want to rank at HubSpot nowadays, and this is why we've built out a flywheel and done so much content marketing over the last 10 years, is now we can write pieces that talk about the best form builder tools, which has high traffic and high intent. People come in through this post and they convert at the same rate as like a product page. We could never have done this if we didn't have all the content from the years before. This would simply be improbable at best, right, to rank something like this. And same thing with content like this. We're competing with G2 Crowd and Capterra and these huge, well-funded kind of like software aggregator review sites. But because we had put in 10 years of effort before that writing what is Instagram type posts and getting a bunch of backlinks through our inbound marketing research, we're able to rank stuff like this. So it's this whole flywheel concept where the more you invest in that content, the easier it is to get results out at the end. And Moz actually put together a really cool like flywheel example where they talk about SEO and content as being something that builds upon itself. So once you invest a little bit in earning links and amplification, that helps out with your content distribution and creation process. The more blog posts you write, the more opportunities there are for links, the more opportunity there is for social promotion. And essentially at a certain point, it starts to lift off and you can start to reap some of those rewards. I built this little meme to talk about that. So you invest in like the top of funnel content and backlink magnets and like this kind of high level stuff, like things that wouldn't bring in customers, but that's how the bottom of the funnel stuff ranks. It's really like doing all the work to lift up those product pages so you can actually get the customers. That's a kind of new idea that I've been working on, so I hope there's some questions and holes to poke through it. Does all of this make sense? Is any of it completely ridiculous sounding?
Okay, so if we don't have like the domain authority, should we start, I think I didn't get this point clearly, should we start with producing a lot of content like what, I don't know, like what is Instagram marketing about, or should we go more for less content but more, you know, like expansive, more well thought?
It depends what space you're in. So I would say if you're in marketing tech, don't do more content. There's so many players in it that the competition level is so high. If you're in a space where nobody's writing content, I would say like go for it and just like do what HubSpot did in the beginning days, which is write 3 posts a day and just hope they land with time. But yeah, I would say in general, be more judicious with your time in the beginning because each individual post you write is an opportunity cost where you could be writing something else, you could be doing other work. So it's like every post that you write should be highly certain that it's going to bring results in some fashion. And once you know what you're going to do, once you strategize that and judiciously choose, I would try to make it 10x better than the competition, which is a phrase. You can't really make something like 10. Well, I don't know. Make it 2x better than the competition. Make it better than the competition. And then invest way more in content promotion, link building, distribution. So essentially building that network of influencers, doing the roundup posts so you know like the people in the space and trying to get as much amplification of it as possible. Once you're big, you have the email list, you have the SEO, you have all those things in place. When you're small, you have to like kind of manually do those and you manually build the relationships. for me, like when I was at Lawn Starter, we were like scraping like email lists of like PR, like journalists and stuff like that, and like manually reaching out. So it was just more of a slog in the beginning, but we were making sure to create like really compelling content. I remember one piece we did, we were trying to build links to our local product page for Austin Lawn Care. Basically, this product does it's like Uber for lawn care. You can, with an app, click it and get a lawn mower to come to your house once a month. So we were doing local SEO, and nobody's linking to lawn-related content. It's a pretty boring field, not a lot of influencers in that space. So we decided to, instead, our linkerati and our influencers were more local blogs and newspapers and basically anything that said Austin in the title. So we created this. This is when infographics were new and novel and not many people were doing them. Did an infographic on the 6 reasons everybody's moving to Austin, Texas, which is, it's like the fastest growing city in the United States. It's just like a very trendy kind of thing. And it's also controversial because half the city hates that it's growing like that and half the city's new. So it's like, I'm new, so I love Austin. I love the fact that it's growing. Then all the people that lived there 10 years ago are like, don't move here. So it was this piece we knew would spark some flames and like it would get people talking. We did a very, very well designed infographic with like a lot of data. And then we spun up conversations in like Reddit threads, and we actually created like fake profiles and all this stuff and like made it seem like there was a huge debate. And then we would email with like our interns' emails, we would email all these like smaller newspapers and be like, oh my God, look at like this debate and discussion going on with this infographic. And then we would reach out and be like, hey, we'd love to like take an interview and like tell you about how we came to this data and all that. So then we had all these newspapers reaching out to us and like local sites being like, can we repost that infographic? I'm like, I guess, as long as you link to it. But that took a lot of effort. Like that was, we strategized from the ground up. We're like, we want to build local landing page links. We want to do this through compelling content and do it through something not a lot of other people are doing. But we only did a couple of those posts. It's like they took so much time that we spent all of it basically doing the link building and the research for who we were going to reach out to. So in general, I would say that would be the way to do it. Look for like a differentiator, create the best content you can, and spend 80% of your time doing distribution and link building. And then when you're HubSpot, you can just publish posts and they rank, which we couldn't do back then, That was a really good question. Did I answer it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
What kind of user-generated content are you doing now on HubSpot?
That's something we're just looking into. I don't know how much I can talk to that because we're basically building directories. So we have an agency directory where people can post, if you have a content marketing agency or an SEO firm or something, you can submit your page. So that's a user-generated component as well. We spun up a lot of just the most popular ones. We took everything from Google, and like if you're a new one, you can basically submit your thing. And then if you're a user of that firm, you can also review them. So that's one component. And this is going to get more expansive. It's kind of hard with agency directories because I guess like how many clients do they have and how many people are going to review it. But we're doing a software directory, and you can basically review software kind of like Capterra and G2 Crowd. So this is net new for us. And again, I don't know how much I can talk to that. But we're moving into that phase. We've gone from templated, and we're moving towards the user-generated stuff. And there's bigger plans in terms of like platform at HubSpot and basically getting more people involved that aren't necessarily product users. So I'll just say that's a huge focus for HubSpot for SEO in the future.
For example, we use high quality content, but it doesn't. We haven't a lot of traffic to these articles, because maybe the question is that higher competition on these topics, produce high quality content not enough to have a higher amount of traffic.
Okay, cool. What space are you in?
What?
What industry or space are you in?
Industry is textbooks website for US textbooks website for American students where they can buy and sell these textbooks.
And is your content strategy now to basically produce like the best piece of content you can?
Yeah.
You look at what's popular and you try to like make it better?
We want to accumulate the traffic, just to produce interesting articles. What can be interesting for the students, for example? Because it's impossible to write all time less amount of topics.
Yeah, you have a similar problem that we had with lawn care. Nobody's reading about it, or nobody that you want to talk to is reading about it, basically. So you have to go outside of that sphere and like create content that actually just appeals to students in general.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of a piece of content that you've done for?
For example, useful mobile apps for students or apps for time using for students, something like this, or life hacks, how you can earn money if you're a student, for example. Something that could be interesting for our customers. We create good content, and if we see that, I'm sorry for my English.
Oh no, it's great.
If we see that article have big amount of traffic, we put something about our websites and about our service in this article. We rewrite it. It's like a mainstream of our strategy, but I see that good articles haven't a big amount of traffic. And maybe it's about high level of competition. I don't know.
Yeah, I would look into the competition and ask. I don't necessarily know the space very well, but about how many students are reading content like that, and what they may want instead. So this is the problem. I'm working with a client now called Wordable. They do like Google Docs to WordPress. Basically, you click a button, uploads right away. But it's for writers, for bloggers, and the space is super competitive, right? Like if, yeah, it's like there's a million content marketing blogs and writing blogs and all that stuff. So what we're doing is actually similar to the Roundup post style, but we're doing bottom funnel content. So it's like, top content marketing tools and stuff like that, where we want to actually acquire customers. But to build authority and kind of credibility for the site and get that distribution and traffic, we're interviewing our customers. So essentially, like we're literally like sending deep investigative like questionnaires and interviews and doing like featured profiles of our customers, and that's actually brought in a ton of. It's interesting for them. They share it. We get more of like an expanding effect where like each individual customer that we interview, or like each individual blogger, influencer that shares our content, that expands our audience and brings more people net overall. But I think the more important thing is that nobody's doing that. So we had to like actually look at like what other people were doing in the industry and try to, what was that old Gary Vaynerchuk thing? No, whatever. We had to do something different. We had to do a left turn when everybody was going right. So I would look, jab, 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 right hook. Yeah, I think that's not even like the right metaphor I'm going for. But essentially, yeah. But yeah, basically, if everybody's doing that type of content, top mobile apps for students, zigzag. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. When everybody's zigging, you zag. Try to do something different and see like what.
To search subjects with low competition. That would be interesting for students to write, not just, let's create some interesting topic, to use topics that have low competitions.
Right. Yeah, so I think that's a complicated question. I think what you're dealing with is sort of the problem of, I don't want to say it's a boring industry, but it's something that like I don't think a lot of people are naturally going to read content on textbooks, but that's your customer, right? So it's one of those things where you sort of need to split personas and like talk to your influencers and linkerati, and to build that authority up so you can rank content that students will read. So when you're doing your Ahrefs, right, you want that content to rank because that's who the students that you're actually looking for customers, they're going to read. But you're not ranking for that content, right? So there's something awash there. There's something a little bit wrong where you might need to build up your authority on the website, but that content's not being linked to and it's not being shared. So I think you need to split the strategy out and like still build those posts, but hope you can do some link building, some long-term stuff, bring in the SEO traffic, but then think about just interesting content that would bring in bigger websites. Like what's a big website in the textbook space or like the education space? I don't even know. Right, but how could you create like an infographic or like a piece of data visualization or like a study or something like that would be linked to by like 40 of those big education companies? Because then your website authority lifts overall, and then you start to see those bottom of the funnel mobile apps for students, those pieces that should be like lower difficulty, then you see those start to lift up. It's like rising tide lifts all boats. You need to build that website authority with the interesting awareness level content in order to compete on those lower funnel ones. It's a complicated one though. There's actually a blog post that I would recommend from my friend Ryan Farley on how to do content marketing for boring industries. He's the Lawn Starter founder. But we mastered that. That was something where we wanted people who wanted lawn care, but like nobody does the customer journey for that space isn't really the same. So we just wanted to rank things like Austin Lawn Care, like basically those bottom funnel terms, but we needed to start writing for the local publications. And we started looking into what kind of content they shared, what kind of content they write and publish and all that stuff, and splitting the strategy. So we do things like, we had one, it was like Naked Gardening Day in the United States. We did like a whole research study on Naked Gardening Day. And we had like interviews and like, I remember Ryan Farley went on like a TV interview and stuff. So that got like 200 links or something like that. Nothing to do with our business. But that like helps us rank for things like Austin. We would put links in that article to Austin Lawn Care landing page. So it's that whole split strategy, and that's one of the confusing pieces. It feels like almost a waste of time sometimes to do those awareness level pieces, and it's difficult to justify it, especially at a startup stage. But in particular spaces, particularly ones that aren't like content marketers like reading about content. That's just who they are. Marketers like reading about marketing. But your customers don't necessarily like reading about the product you sell. So you have to find a way to get readers and links and traffic without writing different content, you know? So it's splitting off and like writing different stuff for influencers and big websites that can help you rank so your students eventually can see that content with search results.
The second thing is, okay, we have traffic,
Mm-hmm.
but how to convert?
Oh, that is a whole different question. I mean, it has to be.
It could be very interesting article. Okay, that's cool, but how to earn?
Well, that's a question. So my team works exclusively on that for the most part. It's mostly a factor of like what search keyword or like who's coming to your article. So if somebody's coming to a what is Instagram marketing article, they're not going to sign up for a marketing automation platform, at least not today. They may sign up for an email list though. So they may sign up for an ebook that is, you know, the top 40 Instagram influencers talk about Instagram marketing. So it's understanding who's coming to your website, and you use Ahrefs, right? So I'll take this split. I was gonna, I have a little section on this later, but I'll cover it now. You can I keep getting shocked by this laptop. You can go into Ahrefs and search for a given article. So let's do this. Oop, did not want tool. Bingo. That's my website. So what I'm going to do is basically look at what search keywords people are using to find this. I think it's fairly obvious with this one, but okay. So 44 keywords. And then I would look at these keywords and say like, oh, okay, cool. So I could build maybe a template for how to set up analytics for a content marketing website. Or maybe if I sell a content marketing analytics tool, I could pitch that straight away. Maybe that's enough like intent. But you want to look at the intent of the blog post and what offer you're doing and make sure that they're not misaligned massively. So that's something at HubSpot that I'm currently trying to clean up, is we have all these blog posts. For instance, top website form builders. If you're searching for top website form builders, you probably want a website form builder. But on that page, we have some ebook for like customer satisfaction survey templates, like which doesn't make any sense. So look at the quality of the traffic that comes in. And it's kind of hard to like infer this. Like you can't interview those people who are coming to the site, or you could set up a Hotjar poll or something like that and ask what they're looking for or something. But build an offer that aligns with their intent coming in. It's going to be nearly impossible to convert somebody to a product on a super high intent or a high awareness level piece. So if somebody's coming in at what is customer satisfaction, going to be really hard to sell them help desk software that day. Does that make sense? But that's where like those bottom of the funnel pieces, you can start to get a little more like pushy with your offers, where if, again, the best content marketing software tools, you can sell content marketing software there. But I wouldn't do one on like the ultimate guide to content marketing. There I would maybe do an ebook. Cool. All right. What did I even put for this? Domain authority of your top 3 to 5 competitors. Is it higher or lower? Oh yeah, so that's something that I could actually put into here while I'm in Ahrefs. Let's say we're selling tea. So let's say we're peaktea.com. They sell these cool tea crystals. We're looking to invest more in content marketing. So what I would do, and I'd probably know off the top of my head which of my competitors are important, but I can also go into Ahrefs and look at competing domains. And like this website, let's say we're the content marketing manager for them. We have a domain rating of 51, which is decent. It's not like amazing. That's what my personal website is, which I like rarely write on. Let's say, all right, let's look at this competitor. Cup and Leaf looks good. So we can put them in. And look at their keyword profile, but then also what their domain rating is. Oh wow, they're only a 32. So we should be able to steal all their keywords, right? That's something where you can find the feasibility where you're like, okay, cool. Our main competitor who has more keywords than us has a lower domain authority. So we write the same article and just like scale that out. So that's actually a huge opportunity area. If I worked for Peak Tea, I would really invest in that. But yeah, basically you want to like find where you are in relation to the market and like how easy it is for you to rank, and that's going to inform your strategy. Cool. Let's move on to the next phase, which is content planning and creation. This one, this is where it gets tactical. So we can choose to veer off, and I'd like to do a little bit more of that like actual in Ahrefs and stuff like that, and ask all the questions you want here. Here, let me grab water real quick. So this is basically the process I use when I work with clients. We didn't have to start from scratch at HubSpot, thankfully. But this is what we use for Conversion Excel, LaunchStarter, all of this. And this is a largely SEO-driven playbook. But I would argue that most content should have at least some component of long-term search SEO stuff. Otherwise, you're relying on like basically BuzzFeed, clickbait, social share stuff, which is always short-term. It's nice to get that spike of traffic. But I would argue that most good content marketing strategies involve some sort of search. And even if that's not your core like acquisition strategy, it still tells you what people in your industry are searching for. So with that in mind, we're going to use search as a framework to building this playbook. Step number 1, find and map our successful competitors in our space. So we talked already about the linkerati, the influencers, and basically having a back of hand understanding of who is in your space and who matters. But when we start to build our content strategy and roadmap, this becomes crucially important. We want to understand how competitive the space is, which keywords matter, and also like who in our space is slightly a competitor that may actually want to work with us on a co-marketing basis or to link to us or something like that. So this is where the tools like Ahrefs, SEMrush, all those tools become very important. So I can go in and basically search for a website. This is my website, alexbirkett.com. And I can look at multiple different pages here. So I can look at like the keywords that this site ranks for. Let's say that's a competitor, and I can get a landscape and like see which keywords I may be able to take and write and rank for instead. And then I can also type in a competitor and find what other domains compete against them. So this is again my website, and I wrote a post on like Austin tourism, which gets more traffic than like all of my content marketing posts combined, which is so disheartening when I have like people reaching out to me about like, hey, what's the best barbecue place in Austin? It's like, I have a marketing website. Come on. But yeah, there's multiple tools for this. At this point, we're really just trying to get a big landscape for who our competitors are, and some that you wouldn't guess. So like when I was doing research at HubSpot for the customer success and customer service space, I didn't actually know all the competitors there. I thought like Zendesk, maybe Zoho, Salesforce has a help desk. Those are just the big names, though. You want to know maybe more than that, especially if you're a smaller competitor or a smaller player and you want to compete, because you often can't compete with somebody like HubSpot. And I'll show you basically why. So yeah, at this point, well, I'll show you in a second. At this point, we're just trying to get a big list of all the competitors in our space and their domain authorities. So let me walk through, actually. This is one of those more tactical components. So let's go, what industry should we work through? Like what kind of company should we look into for this? Let's pretend we're building a startup strategy.
Software,
Software, what kind of software?
like development software,
Development software.
like a service of development software.
Like for,
Like our source software development, for instance, so something like that.
so who would buy, like what's an example of a product in this space, like, or a company?
Basically, our product like is a service of developing a software.
Oh, so it's like a development shop for,
Yeah, no, like a digital studio, I guess.
okay, let me try this out. What's like the main search term somebody would use to find that if they were searching for it on Google?
That's an issue. Yeah, but well, mostly it's like custom software
Uh-huh.
or like software development or off-the-shelf software sometimes.
Off-the-shelf software.
But sometimes, but it's not the main key. I would say that custom software will go to that.
Custom software. That's okay. Is this one? Would that,
Yeah.
so that would be a company that would operate in this space?
Excuse me.
Would this company be an example of one that would be in this space?
Well, I guess so. Yeah.
All right, cool. So this is our company we're doing content for. We are going to go into Ahrefs.
No, it's not our company, but it looks like a company.
Right, yeah, totally. We're just using this as an example, just to walk through. And hopefully I can do this on the spot. So let's say this is our company that we're looking into. We're going to look, obviously, at our domain rating, but then also we're going to try to get multiple competitors. So we want to see currently like who competes for us, so competing domains. Also, we want to look just generally at the market. So if we want to find all of the others, let's search another time. So custom software development. So here, oh, okay, cool. So this is perfect. We have a whole list of competitors, right? So we can basically put all of these on a spreadsheet. We can add their domain rating and look at them when we start to build our keyword map, when we start to build our huge backlog of keywords that we'll eventually use from to parse out and to build our strategy. But at this point, we're really just looking at like all of the competing people out there. So we can look at all of these sites, add them all to our list, and click in and look at their backlink profile, the keywords they rank for. And at this point, what I would do is basically export all these. I don't know what any of these words mean. This is I am not, this is a good one though, because I don't know the space very well, but it's basically industry agnostic. You can do this for any space. So yeah, I would export all that and put it into a spreadsheet and just have a big list of competitors lined up with their domain rating, just to see like who's out there, what keywords you can possibly take, and then like when you eventually start to build that roadmap, you've just got a big list of places to find ideas from. And then of course there's other ways to generate keyword ideas for search. You can sit around in a circle and talk like our product needs to rank for custom software development or something like that. So you can add those keywords to the list too and see like what kind of things actually have search volume. But at this point we're just trying to build a huge list of opportunities. And also in this part, like I was kind of alluding to, what you'll want to do is build a huge space or a huge list of competitors, but you might want to add some that aren't actually full-on competitors. And you can tag them with domain authority of like under 50 is a tier 3, 50 to 70 is a tier 2, 70 to 100 is a tier 1. Then you get to see like who's got the power in the space. But then you can also tag them as competitor, partner, industry blog, etc. Because then you have a list of your competitors that you can use to generate keyword ideas. But then you also have a list of partners who can possibly help you with guest posts and co-promotion, co-marketing, and then industry blogs where you can build links. So you start to like develop relationships with the editors there and the journalists or whatever. So then you have just a massive list of the landscape of your entire like kind of operational space. So this kind of becomes a core, I guess, strategic document that I use to build relationships for link building, build ideas for your topics, et cetera, et cetera. Does anybody have any other ideas in terms of like how to, I guess, generate ideas for like for keywords and all that stuff? Is this an approach that most people use, looking at competitors, or is there something else you guys use to find topic ideas? Yeah.
I actually use like blogs from other spheres or fields to generate ideas. Like for example, I go to href blogs and see if they're posting like a huge listicle of free SEO tools. So I come up with an idea why not build a huge list of free sales tools when we can. So it seems kind of like competitor research, but you're not searching for a competitor, but just for a very cool example of content marketing in any other field, you can just extrapolate to yours.
It seems like kind of an adjacent industry thing. That's really cool. I do the same. I keep a swipe file of cool content that I like. That's where I think I got the idea for the Wordable interviews from First Round Review. It's a place where First Round Review is basically where you look for, oh yeah.
I have a question. What type of tool do you use to track whether content is engaging with this cool content? How can you decide this type of content is cool? Just do you use BuzzSumo or?
Yeah, so it depends what metric you care about. So for me, I'm less concerned on social shares. I would say our brand team probably would argue with that, and they're more interested in that type of content. For me, it's pure traffic and conversions. So I'm purely looking at Ahrefs, and I'm purely looking at like how many people are coming to that article. Well, actually, take that back. Search volume for the overall terms and like the pages that rank for it, to how much is the ceiling and impact possible, how much traffic do we get, or like what is our ranking, and then how many people convert from that. So it's like we sort of build a funnel from like the top level where it's like the term form builder gets 4,000 searches, and we rank number 2 for that. So we get 3,000 traffic per month, and then we convert it 5%. So I build like funnels based on that, and I can find like high intent, low traffic posts, high traffic, low intent posts. So like something like Instagram marketing, I guarantee HubSpot ranks for it. I'm just going to try this out. Oh, fuck. Every time. This thing is just shocking me. Also, this Chrome extension, we built this for like a project. It shows like all different HubSpotters and their like goals and stuff. It's kind of cool. Oop. Yeah, so for something like this, we would basically look at the keyword search volume. So we would look at competitors. I'm sure like our SEO team found that Hootsuite or Neil Patel ranked for it, and we're like, we could beat them. So we look and say like, oh, Instagram marketing has 80,000 searches per month. Like that seems valuable to us because we have a social media tool. It seems related to our product and our industry. So we'll probably want to take that into account. And then usually the way we prioritize posts is based on either converting, so like winning the minds of people. So it's something like top form builders or something like that. And then within that category, we also look at high traffic, longer term stuff. So it's like, nobody's going to sign up for a piece of software based on an ultimate guide to Instagram marketing. But again, they might sign up for an ebook, they might sign up for a course, they might sign up for our academy. We look at all that stuff as sort of conversion content. And then we have around 20 to 30% of our content strategy that's based on winning the hearts of people. So that's things like, forget the funnel, we're moving to the flywheel, and strategic content that we know isn't going to rank for any keywords, but we think is going to help us build our like overall public perception as a thought leader in marketing. So we look at multiple different components, but I would say my team in particular, because I'm on the acquisition team, I care about how many conversions it brings. So whether it's 1,000 or 10,000 searches a month, I care if it's high intent. So if it aligns very perfectly with a product category. And then our search engine optimization team cares about traffic. So they're going to organize things by overall search volume. And also it's got to be somewhat related to the product. We do rank for some really stupid things, which I'll talk about later. Again, don't send it HubSpot, please. But yeah, basically we have different categorizations based on our team and our goals.
Who wins the battle when you have two different teams who are both going after different things? You're going after acquisition.
Be careful with this response.
Someone's going after quality.
Well, you know how they always talk about organizational politics, office politics? and how everybody complains about that. That's where it comes in, and it's actually like something important. So I would love to say that we have a heuristic or an algorithm in which we determine like rank stack order. Conversions are most important, traffic second, winning hearts is third important. We don't do that, so there's still an element of gut feel and influence within that department. I would say I've particularly spent a lot of time evangelizing for more conversion heavy, product heavy content, because traditionally HubSpot's been very like inbound, a little softer on like pitching our own products, and we'll do like these high level, what is Instagram marketing, what is customer success, stuff like that. So it really is, it's almost like you need to have your idea in our company. You need to come up with sort of a framework or an idea, test it out and make sure it gets results, and then you start evangelizing for it, and then people incorporate that in the overall thing. But right now we have a pretty good split where, because we have so many writers and so much content going out, that we have a pretty even portfolio of the different content that's going out on a weekly basis. So I would say at this point, all the teams are pretty happy. Now there's always trade-offs though. So it's like I work on the freemium acquisition team, so I'm working on like portals. So like anybody that comes in via a free product. And then we have another side of the business that works on leads, so ebooks, webinars, stuff like that. And one blog post can only have like one offer, you know. So there's always tension and trade-offs, and for the most part, we try to hash that out and align with what makes the most sense for the business. So I would say at this point, we're not writing as many posts on the top motivational quotes of 2019. We're doing a little bit more product stuff, and then the CTAs we really align with the theme of the post. So it's like if it's on something high level and top of funnel, we'll do an ebook or some sort of lead magnet. And if it's a low funnel, kind of like a product level thing, we'll pitch the product. But yeah, it's more of a conversation. It's not something we figured out entirely.
Yeah, we have a software distribution website, B2C. So I was always wondering, what is the best percentage of this low intent, high volume, and low volume, high intent type of content? So
Yeah. That's a really good question again. I was just listening to a podcast that my VP marketing did with somebody who works in growth at Supermetrics, and they were talking about this. So I because I'm an acquisition like CRO guy, like I always want to push like conversions, product, like let's get signups. But I think there is a trade-off too. I think that if you push that too much, you end up losing out on the brand value in the end, which is one of these really nebulous things because nobody tracks like how the brand is perceived or if people come to you as a trusted source. But if I'm constantly just writing articles on like why HubSpot makes the best marketing automation software, you know, or like if that had any search volume, I think we're going to lose out on like that top of funnel, like long-term traffic where people hit our site for 3 different things over the course of 3 months, and then they're like, wonder what these guys do. You know, like they seem trustworthy in this space, so maybe we should start looking into them. If I said off the top of my head what I think it should be, I would say 80-20 in favor of like product and conversion and like core content, and then 20% for brand. But that matters. It really depends on like what industry you're in and what the competitive landscape is. For instance, First Round Review writes all these like in-depth interviews, and none of it talks about venture capital, and they're a venture capital firm. So it's like they hope that they eventually build enough credibility in that space that smart entrepreneurs come, and they eventually associate First Round Review with intelligence and education and good content. And when it comes to raising a round, it's like, oh, okay, cool. So First Round Review is somebody we should talk to, particularly if we're in this area in Boston or whatever. So it depends. It's like, if your product's very simple, I would say something that, you know, it doesn't matter as much what the brand is. If you're working on a very complex purchase with multiple competitors, I think people are going to take those things into account. So you want to build some portion of your portfolio specifically for winning the hearts of people, where it's like, they want to work with you over Marketo or Intercom or something like that. So yeah, I would definitely favor the conversion, data-driven stuff. That's just me.
I have 2 questions regarding the keywords research process. So whenever I start working with a new product, I come up with a keyword cloud, which I find as many relevant as I can, and then I research the priority keywords for me that are the most relevant, and then have them for the lowest competition. And then I try to pack as many new articles. So the first question is more about the process. How often should I spend more time researching new additional keywords, not just focusing on the essence that I prepared? And the second question, how do I know when to stop? How do I know if I have, if I packed enough keywords in the article?
This is not for like several articles. This is just for one.
No, I mean throughout the whole content strategy. For example, I come up with a keyword cloud that I focus on for the next 6 months.
So I don't know totally what a keyword cloud is. Is this so?
A list of keywords that are relevant.
Oh, okay, cool. So you're running a I don't know, paleo nutrition site, and you find like 20 keywords for like paleo recipes and like healthy recipes and all these different things that could be different articles, and that's what your cloud is. So how long should you make that? That was the question. Like how far out should you plan?
Yes, how far out should I plan, and how often do I need to research more keywords?
I would say I like to plan out every quarter, every 3 months. I think that gives you enough flexibility to change as you go. So something that you'll learn as you do content marketing is there's a Mike Tyson quote. It's something like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And it's basically saying like you can theorize and strategize and like research all you want, but when rubber meets the road, you start to like learn new things. So 3 months to me is a good agile way to like say we're going to commit to this strategy for at least the short term, but in that time we hope to learn new things and incorporate new keywords and new decisions. And then as you're writing content, you're going to discover like, oh, actually, we should go for this keyword, or like let's add this in. And I think you're going to compile those with time, but then you should also officially review each 3 months and like come up with that new strategy. That's at least the way we do it at HubSpot. That's the way I do it with clients. I think it's very difficult to put out a 12-month roadmap and expect that to be like set in stone and actually effective, because like what you know today should not be the same level as what you know in 9 months. You should just be learning all the time. So I would opt towards agility and like shorter term roadmaps, and then like incorporate as much learnings as you can as you go. Did that answer?
Yeah, but regarding my second question, I think I really have a problem because I try to pack as many keywords in any article as I can. So how many should be enough, and how to know when I should stop packing more?
What I would do, this is what I do, is just like the head keyword. So I go for the main one. So if I want to rank for content marketing strategy, I just write the best article I can in the world on content marketing strategy and try to make that the core keyword focus. But then if there's secondary keywords, I try to look into the search features. So every time, let's look at that as a keyword as an example. Or actually, do you have a keyword example you could, that you know off the top of your head that has volume? No worries if not.
Blockchain marketplace.
Blockchain marketplace. Really testing my knowledge of new technology. All right, so if this were an article, well, first off, you're going to want to look at like what the results are, because that explains what style of content it should be, whether it's a product page, like a listicle, a what is a blockchain marketplace. So it looks like, it looks like informational content for the most part, and there's some product pages. So there's a mixture. In that sense, I would probably actually create a couple pieces of content to see which ranks. I would try to create a product page. Hopefully that ranks, right? Like that's the best thing in the world. Then you get like actual product users. But I would also do a piece like this where it's like, I don't even know what Hacker Noon did, how blockchain will revolutionize online marketplaces. But then I also like to look into the keyword ideas and phrase match and all that stuff. So having same terms. And then basically if there is a search snippet, like a feature snippet, it doesn't look like there's much for this one actually. But yeah, so if there's a secondary keyword, here I'll do form builder, because that's an interesting example I know specifically, because I architected that one. We know there's a ton of search traffic for that, and we know there's a mixture of product or user intent. So we know there's some product pages that rank, and we know there's some listicles. So we created a product page and a listicle. And on the listicle, we also knew that there was other kind of best of keywords. So best online form builder. And you look at the SERP features, and there's a feature snippet. So I would create that as a secondary keyword, but I would make very certain that I would rank for the feature snippet. So I would set it up in the style of like, the list snippet where it's like, hang on. Right, so I would create it in that format where it's a listicle style. think we actually did that in this article. Yeah, so basically like H2 tag, and then a bunch of like 1, 2, 3, 4. But it's a related keyword. It's not obviously like too different. So like that clearly like revolves around the same concept of the form builder. So I'm not stuffing any additional keywords. I'm just creating it to rank for something that I know is relevant, and it could probably hit both of those. Now sometimes I actually want to build a tool for this where there's oftentimes multiple different keywords that are somewhat similar. So like online form builder and form builder, should you create different articles for those terms? So that is manual at this point, where I would go into both of those keywords and look at how similar the search results pages are. And if like 10 out of 10 articles are the same, you probably don't need to do any additional keyword stuffing. It's probably just going to rank for both anyway. If some of them are the same, so if like 50%, I would try to stuff that secondary keyword in as much as possible to try to rank for both. And if they're completely different SERPs, if like the results are totally different, then I would just write 2 different articles for it. So it's, at this point, the answer is depends, which is always a frustrating answer, but it's basically like, is the keyword relevant enough to rank within that article? Should you create a second one? Should you create just like a feature snippet section where it's like, if you're doing an article on customer satisfaction, that's a keyword that gets 10,000 searches a month. It probably makes sense to also put what is customer satisfaction as a keyword too, but that's a section within that article. It doesn't make too much sense to create a new article for that. So you just create like an H2 headline tag in that article and like a little box that explains the definition, and you can rank for both of those. But you're always, at the end of the day, looking to match the user intent of a search term with the best content for that user intent. So that's what Google wants to do, is basically give the user, the searcher, the best possible experience. So you don't want to create like this jarring, keyword stuffed, tons of different like sections. If somebody's searching for something, you want to make logical sense to whomever is going to land on that page. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I'd like to ask which approach looks more reasonable. I like to find some collection of keywords for your industry for a quarter, like for 3 months, or to prepare them each time you're actually working on the particular article in your blog.
I do it every 3 months. And in fact, like when you're doing this process, you're going to end up with more than 3 months worth of content. But I'll usually create like very detailed roadmap that I hand to the content team with title suggestions, URL suggestions, and then secondary keywords and search snippets that we should include. And I do that up front just because it processizes things a lot easier, because otherwise the content team would constantly be like emailing me and being like, what are the what's the URL suggested for this one? So that's maybe a facet of HubSpot. If I were at a startup and doing things myself, I may go week by week, I may go month by month, and it just depends like how I prefer to work. But that's an individual question and like kind of an organizational thing. Whereas at HubSpot, like the least amount of friction and the least amount of back and forth between the SEO and content team, the better. Because that allows the SEO and acquisition team to focus on strategy long term, and then the content team to execute and just churn out blog posts and like rank for them. So we like to do 3 months of just very, very robust and detailed content suggestions, and then they don't have to ask us questions. They can pretty much just read off the outline and write a great post, and it ranks right away. And then, like I said, there's always a big backlog. So if you have like tons of your competitor sites and keywords, there's always going to be just a huge amount of keywords that you can't possibly have time. Even a HubSpot, like we have like 20 writers. Like we have so much like resources, but we still have more keywords than we have time to write. So I think there's like, once you do this process, there's almost always going to be more keywords than you could ever possibly have time to write. So yeah, I would split it. I mean, it depends, basically.
And what do you think about the reasonable maximum of the keywords used in the article? Right? Because there is a new Google ranking rules and so on. So what would be too much? Definitely too much.
That depends too. It really depends on the complexity of the content. Sometimes it's a long tail one where it's very specific. How to build a form. I would just rank how to build a form. I wouldn't try to stuff too much in there. Marketing automation, stuff 25 different variants in there. And there's a tool for that actually. Every time. Yep. This is ridiculous. Yeah, so there's a tool called like Answer the Public. I mean, 25 is a random number I threw out there, but I'm saying if it's a complex thing that's very high level, you can usually write a bunch of different sections and rank for each individual one. And also there's this like latent semantic analysis. that shows you related keywords that can help you build sort of a more nuanced profile that allows Google to say like, oh, this person actually knows what they're talking about because they've included these variants of the keyword. It doesn't seem like they're necessarily trying to stuff and just rank for this very specific title tag and like this very specific URL slug. You actually look like you're writing for humans more so, which you should be, I guess. So for example, oh yeah, this guy's ridiculous, right? Have you guys used this tool before?
Yeah.
It's a cool one. Yeah, so this would be a piece that would take a lot of effort to rank, right? Marketing automation is a clearly competitive keyword. So you're gonna need to build a big article, something that at HubSpot we call like a pillar page. So you're competing for like a pretty competitive thing, and it's very business important. So we'll do a huge like 5,000 word article. And in those 5,000 words, you have a lot of room to riff on different concepts. And that's where I like a tool like this, or even Ahrefs where you do the related keywords. So having same terms, and you can do a section just on WordPress form builders or free form builders or HTML form builders. So anything like this, you can find multiple variants that have the same terms or like also rank for. I would consider putting those in. But yeah, very specific posts, I would just go straight up for the keyword itself. So for this one, you could do how to use marketing automation, why marketing automation experts drink. I don't know if I would put that in. That may be a specific article on its own. That may be for the Linkerati. That's an interesting one. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I think for broader topics where there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of different sections and subsections you could put, it makes sense to put, like if you were a searcher looking for the keyword marketing automation, it's a pretty broad general term. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was multiple different like sections and kind of user intent based things. But if I'm searching for the best Neapolitan pizza in Cleveland, then I would just try to rank for that keyword. I wouldn't try to stuff too many other ones in.
How long articles should be?
How long?
How many words?
Depends on the space. So competitors too. Yeah, so that's actually a question that SEO experts are always debating, because you'll see this new research out that comes out every year, I think via BuzzSumo, where they analyze different articles, and they always show that the average article that ranks on page 1 of Google is like 2,500 plus words. Clearly there's some nuance, like you can find health-related terms or very specific keywords, like Livestrong for a long time was writing these 700 word pieces and they were ranking for everything. So again, my answer with this is always no more than you need to, because the more additional effort you put in, you're basically like, you have in economics, it's diminishing marginal returns. So essentially, as your effort goes up linearly, your results kind of flatten out. So with every bit of effort you put into something after the point at which you get the maximum return is wasted effort. There's some nuance to that, because if you build quality content, there's the argument to be made that Google will always want to deliver that, and they only get better algorithmically with time. So the more quality the article, the more chance it will always rank, as opposed to like Livestrong and About.com, who wrote these really short, like kind of trash articles. And then every time an algorithm update comes out, they lose their rankings in their business. Whereas HubSpot or Conversion Excel has always kind of like written for the user, like the end reader. And every algorithm update, we've actually increased our traffic. The question on how long the article should be: longer than your competitors. Yeah. I'd say just look at, that's the skyscraper technique, right? Like, is anybody familiar with Brian Dean, Backlinko? So his whole thing was basically look at what ranks currently. So if you're trying to write an article on link building, you look at the other sites that are like Ahrefs or SC, Search Engine Journal or something like that. You look at those and just build a way better article and like add some more words and beef it up, and then like reach out to all the people who link to them and say like, hey, I've got this better article. Like, why are you still linking to that one? So yeah, it's very contextual. Basically, if you can get away with ranking for something with very little content, why not? But in most competitive industries nowadays, it requires a lot more effort, especially if your domain authority isn't as high as your competitors.
Mm-hmm.
I would say at HubSpot, we generally try to shoot for like 2,000 plus words. Mm-hmm. Sometimes 5,000 with those huge guides. Yeah.
I just want to ask you for an opinion about the framework, the research framework. You mentioned that you just gather your competitors and then see what they rank for. For instance, I'm working in B2B space, and it's a service company. We're a bit in transition to a product, but still. And most of the competitors are targeting very broadly, you know, most of the service companies, and they are ready to, I don't know, whatever. I mean, we're choosing a segment we know and work with, for instance, digital marketing agencies, yeah? And we know the process, and the buying process is usually really complex and long. So we know the questions they ask at each stage of the process. So I'm thinking about transforming those questions into keywords and just trying to see related keywords and then trying to build the content strategy. What do you think about this framework? Have you done it?
I couldn't frame a better content strategy. That's amazing. You're talking to your customers, you're understanding what pain points they have, what problems they're actually asking with their own words, and translating that into content. There's no better way. Like, that's what we used to do at Conversion Excel. So, I mean, it differs based on like what your capacities are and whatnot. Again, HubSpot's got a lot of resources, so we can write pieces of content that may not bring in traffic or subscribers or customers right away. And we just look at that as like part of the whole deal. We've just got so much production going out. If you have limited resources, at Conversion Excel, it was me, another writer, guest writers, and freelancers, and that was it. We really had a lot of like content to publish, but like not a lot of resources to work with. So we would basically, like, we would look at our customer questions, like things from Intercom. We had a survey that went out on our third email, and that's how we would come up with topic ideas. And oftentimes I would plug something in, so like, what's a CRO question we would get asked for all the time? So like server-side testing versus client-side testing. Or like somebody would ask, what are the benefits, right? Now, I wouldn't necessarily know that had search traffic at first until I would search like that question that the customer actually asked. I would basically verbatim plug that into Google and see like what top 3 articles rank. And then I can go to Ahrefs, analyze that, whatever currently ranks for it, and see what keywords come up. And then you've got a roadmap. So then you can actually like target those keywords and assume that that's going to answer similar search queries that your customers are asking for. But I think that's probably one of the coolest ways to come up with search ideas outside of your competitors. And you'll probably find new competitors that way too. You'll find other sites that are ranking for that, and then you can add them to your like backlog in terms of like, are the competitors, partners, you know, different industry blogs and stuff like that. Because that's a really cool way to like go outside of what you currently know and source your customers for stuff that like may not have come up in that original search. But yeah, amazing point.
Thanks.
What do you think about LSI keywords?
About what?
LSI keywords.
Oh yeah, so I like the idea. I think it often comes up a little bit more, it comes off a little robotic when people try to add too many of them. So LSI keywords, the tool, right? Yeah, so LSI is latent semantic analysis. Latent semantic analysis, LSA? Yeah. Oh, there's me. Oh, LSI. So this one, right? So basically, this is doing something similar that Answer the Public is, in that it's showing you like a core keyword and like other things that you should include. So I think that it's a good idea, and you should make it like nuanced and like cover other topics. But I've had a couple freelance writers use this tool, and they like really literally add those keywords like all over the place, and it just comes across as like keyword stuffing. So I would say if it gives you ideas in terms of other like tertiary and secondary topics to write about, I would do it. And it's always fun to like add different things in here. So it's like, what's a good topic? What's a good like topic? Like what's an article you would write, like a keyword?
I don't know. What is counterfeit textbooks?
What is what, textbooks?
Counterfeit textbooks.
Counterfeit. Okay. Okay, I'll just do counterfeit textbooks. How do you spell counterfeit? Is that right?
Yes.
Ah, dang it. Well, here. Okay, so this, yeah, it's basically giving you a similar report, something like Ahrefs having similar terms would, or Answer the Public would. You're finding a bunch of related terms that you can also add to your article, which goes to your question about how many keywords you should put into a single article. Search for these different things, find what percentage of the SERPs look the same. So if you type customer satisfaction in, that gets 40,000 monthly. That's crazy. I don't know if that's right. I don't think we get that much traffic from our article. But anyway, if customer satisfaction survey gets a totally different search result page, I would create a separate article for it. You could still add the keyword in, right? Like customer satisfaction and customer satisfaction survey go hand in hand. So maybe you could put a section in with that. But yeah, I've just seen when people use this too literally, it becomes something of a prescription rather than something that helps them write an article that's better for the user. And they literally will take like the top 10 keywords here and just like write section headers like customer satisfaction index. And it's like, I don't know, it's too literal and it looks like fishy to me and to Google. And it's like, you know, where'd you get that? But yeah, I think it's a really good way to find like the secondary keywords that could rank for a given term. And I put that in like later in the deck in the content creation section. So this is actually, I don't do this up front. When I'm doing the whole 3-month roadmap, I'll put basically all the core or like head keywords that I want to rank for. So it'll be like customer satisfaction, customer feedback, stuff like that. And I know that I want individual articles for those things because they have enough search volume and search intent. But then when it comes to writing the article, if I'm the writer, I'll often plug that keyword in and say like, oh, it also ranks for all these things. So this is going to help me write the individual piece of content. So there's actually like, I don't know if that would be a different strategy within this, but there's the overall top-down, you're creating a monthly or quarterly plan. There's a strategy for that, and then there's a strategy for each article creation too. And I look at those separately, or connected but separately, right? Like when it comes to the time to write the article, that's when I look at like the competition, what keywords they're putting in, LSI keywords, Answer the Public and all that stuff. But yeah, I think it's a great idea to use tools like this. Just not too literally.
Just how much usual keywords or side keywords and what percentage of those?
What percentage of these keywords should you use? Again, it depends on the complexity of the article, but here's a strategy that we've used at HubSpot with this particular topic. So if you look at our customer satisfaction guide, we'll have subject or like headers, headlines for each of these different like sub keywords that we chose to include, but then we also wrote separate articles for them, so they'd potentially rank for those as well. I'll show you real quick. Yeah, so the title should include like the core keyword that you want to rank for and also like the URL slug, but then everything else can go within the article in like different buried sections. And I like to do like table of contents, so like if there's multiple different subcomponents of a topic, like we can actually break those down and include them in the article. What? Why is that ranking now? Where'd my customer satisfaction guide go? Well, anyway. There it is. I can't believe the other one overtook it. Yeah, so we had multiple sections. Like we knew there was customer satisfaction tools was a latent semantic keyword that we knew we wanted to rank for. How to improve customer satisfaction got like 500 search volume. So these are all examples of different keywords that came up in the Answer the Public, in the LSI keywords and all that stuff. So when it came time, we knew we wanted to rank for customer satisfaction. Clearly, that's like the format for the title. Like we wanted to rank for that keyword. It's right there. It's all over the article, but we also chose to put these sub-related topics as well. And for a percentage, very small. We did not try to put like 40 of them in. Once the search volume tapered off and we were getting LSI keywords with like 50 search volume, we didn't include those. We just included the core ones. So it's like how to measure, how to improve, customer satisfaction tools, and then you can go to the different sections and like these were almost like sub-articles within the main post, if that makes sense. Because we were really trying to create the ultimate guide, literally with the title. and basically have all of the knowledge that somebody would actually look for if they were looking for an ultimate guide to learning about customer satisfaction. So there's part of this is objective and part of this is like based on the keyword search you can do, or the search research you can do. Part of it is just thinking, if I clicked on an article with the keyword search customer satisfaction and the title was the ultimate guide to customer satisfaction, what would make sense to include in this article and what would make sense to exclude? So if you end up like with a book of like 40 keywords, it's like a little overwhelming for any searcher. But you'd think like, okay, cool, they probably want to learn how to measure it. They probably want some tools or like tips or something on it. And maybe best practices, like customer satisfaction best practices. But when it starts to go down the list where it's like, even sample questionnaire, like that seems like a totally different intent, right? If I was just looking for an ultimate guide. So part of this is subjective. And that's always going to be a component of good content creation in my mind, is you have your strategy and you have your keyword volume and you have like the intent and you have the keyword difficulty. But at a certain point, it's saying like, how is this content different or better than the other stuff that's ranking? And what makes sense to include and exclude? And I think part of that is always going to be more art than science.
What do you do when there's an update to one of the articles that you've previously written? So, for example, you write the ultimate guide, and then in 6 months' time, there's a new best practice for a particular part of that article. Do you go back and just edit that one out, or do you write a whole new article for it?
If it's a new keyword, we'll write a new article for it. But if it's just an updated like practice or something, we have an optimization team that goes back every 3 months and they build a roadmap of different articles to update. So we have heuristics for that too. So basically we don't want to update anything too recently. Otherwise it would just be a chaotic mess where we're trying to constantly like update every post. So it's basically blog posts that get above, I don't know, 1,000 monthly searches a month, something like that. It's got to be above a certain threshold. Otherwise we don't care about it that much. Or above a certain conversion threshold. If it's bringing in customers, we care about it. And then if it's 6 months or older, and it's ranking above position 10, so if it's on page 2 or greater, then we have a historical blog optimization team that'll go in and basically, instead of having a roadmap of net new articles like our content team has, they have a roadmap of like old articles that they want to update and like improve and basically make better so we rank for them on page 1. So that's a whole plan that we have, and I would recommend that even for startups, even if there's fewer resources, because you know that old like saying about how it's more expensive to acquire new customers than it is to keep old ones around. It's sort of the same with content. It's more expensive to create and write a net new article, and it's less certain that you're going to rank for it. But if you're on page 2 for a given keyword, it's way cheaper to update that article, build some links to it, and hope to get on page 1. It's just much more cost effective. But yeah, I think baking optimization and updates into your strategy and having like quarterly audit sessions where you basically, I have this section later, but I'm just going to do it now. You can look for keywords that you almost rank for really easily in Ahrefs. So you basically just do position, 10 to, you don't want it to be too far out, because if it's on like 100, it's probably not super relevant. And above like 500 searches a month. And then what I would also do is probably bring this to Excel and do a pivot table and just like do URLs so you can see how many keywords and like the total search volume for that given blog post and how much opportunity there is. And then also like the average position. So if the average position and like the search volume is like high enough, you're like, oh shit, we could get a ton more traffic if we just update this one. So if I was Conversion Excel, if I worked there still, I would look into this post. There's 15,000 searches here and it's almost on page 1. But this gives you a really interesting roadmap of things to update, and then you can weigh those pros and cons versus creating new content. If it ranks like 75 for a term, it's probably not relevant enough to like update it. It's probably like we should write a new post with that keyword. If it's on page 2, it's like, what can we do to improve that? What can we do to outrank the competition? Do we need more links? Do we need to add a section or something like that? But yeah, I would bake that into the content model in your roadmap and say like, well, if we just put a little time into our logical fallacies article, we can probably push that to page 1, and it's almost 100,000 search volume, so it's probably like higher impact than writing a new article. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
I wanted to ask you, so you, when you make a 3-month strategy, right? how, like, what do you start with? I mean, it's very different from, like work specifications for the articles, or right? So
Yeah.
you, I don't know, like analyze your competitors, and then you come up with the core keywords. And so, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I really wish I could show you like our search insights report, but HubSpot may not be cool with that, so I'm gonna not do that. Maybe I can do like, no, I'm not even gonna try. Basically, because I worry about acquisition, I'm focused on the product keywords. So what you were talking about with getting people to actually sign up for the textbooks and those kind of product ones. So I'm analyzing, basically, I'm gonna look at different competitors in those product lines. So if I'm looking for form builders, I'm gonna look at Typeform's website. I'm gonna look at JotForm and all these different tools and see what keywords they rank for. And then I'm gonna filter for the most like high intent ones. So I do that, I basically use CPC as an indicator that people are paying for that keyword and it's probably high intent. And then traffic volume has to be enough too. So if it's like 10 searches a month, even if we rank number 1, how many customers are gonna come in? 1 per month. So it's not really worth it. So I'm looking for things above maybe 100 or 200 search volume per month. Because remember, these are high intent posts. So if we do rank for it, we're gonna get a lot more customers. But yeah, I basically filter in from current big competitors in those spaces because they've already done all the heavy lifting. They've invested years into like doing the SEO strategy, and like they're a form specific tool, so they've only worried about carving out that niche for themselves. Whereas HubSpot, again, has like 100 tools. It's like we haven't really worried about all those things. But then I'll also do things like if I were in the market for a forms tool, what would I search? What is lead generation? Like how to get better at lead generation. I would start at the very high level and I would filter those keywords and send them to the content team, but that's not my core strategy. And then I would go down and be like, all right, once I figure out I want a forms tool, what keywords would come up? And it's like best online form builder, HTML form builder, and all those things. And then I would build that into a strategy and roadmap that looks like this. I actually think I do have a HubSpot thing in here. No, that's for Wordable. Yeah, usually I put a little roadmap in here. But yeah, anyway, I put it on a customer journey map. So the high awareness level stuff that has high traffic, like the what is, basically the stuff that's not going to get customers right away. And then I map it all the way down. So then there's how-to templates. So it's like form design templates or something like that. And then all the way at the core, I get to my like decision level keywords. And that's what my team focuses on, is building a strategy to rank those. Whereas the SEO team is completely different. They basically look at all competing sites, all high traffic keywords. They bring in like ideation and like brainstorm sessions and like what keywords might have high search volume. And they're always in the game of basically trying to find those 100,000 keyword or 100,000 search terms. That's not the game that I play, but like they're playing that game. I'm playing the conversion game. And then our brand team is playing basically the win the hearts team or the hearts game. So they're looking into thought leadership and different ideas from our executive board and stuff like that. And then every quarter we all come together and decide which ones make the cut and which order and all that stuff. So it's multiple competing interests that all come together and we all kind of get our seat at the table. But for me, and I think for most startups, I would argue, you're really factoring in like the customer acquisition potential to it. I feel like that was a really roundabout way of answering that.
Yeah, it's a bit, like complicated. I think I got your point. Yeah, but I still need some time to think over it.
Happy to clarify. Yeah. That's a tough one. So when I brought that up earlier on the SWOT analysis of HubSpot, that's one of those things that you wouldn't think would be a weakness, but because we have so many resources and so many teams and products, it becomes very complicated when it comes to prioritization and actually execution. Whereas like we have all the resources and we can rank for things, but it's like, well, what do we do first and second, and who gets the answer and like who gets to decide that? Whereas if you have one product line and you're a startup, you may not have the power to rank things as quickly, but it's super clear like what you want to rank for. So there's really no argument. With Lawn Starter, we wanted to rank for Austin Lawn Care. We basically like had that business in that place and we knew that was the keyword and nobody had to fight for it. So all of our efforts basically went into the execution aspect. So that's another place where it's like, what type of company are you and like what are your resources and all that. Cool, yeah. I don't remember where I am in this. Oh, here's the thing. Yeah, that's the roadmap I build. And then I turn that into so this is actually like the customer journey map. It's really, oh no, you can see it up there. So yeah, the what, how template, tool discovery, and this is all for our forms one. So we basically built blog posts for types of forms, form design, web form design, mobile form design, and then all the way down at the bottom, that's the stuff that I worry about is like Wufoo alternative, Typeform alternative, and we built comparison pages. And then the bottom stuff was like the online form builder. So that's how I kind of map it out in my mind and like for our content team. Actually, I think that was the next slide. Yeah, so anyway, we answered a lot of the questions that I was going to talk about here anyway, so that's really cool. Content strategy at HubSpot looks like this. It could look different for other companies, but basically when we have all these keywords built up, or actually we didn't even do the keyword part. I'm skipping steps. Yeah, so we talked about a lot of this with finding the top keywords and how to prioritize, but we have all these competitors now. We have all the ideas from the industry that we've built up. So essentially I would go into Ahrefs and find these content gaps. So I'm looking at what my site ranks for currently and what the others rank for and what the difference is. So this is my website and I'm putting in like Content Marketing Institute, Neil Patel, Opt-in Monster, Sumo.com, HubSpot. Of course, we have all the rankings, which I mentioned before, HubSpot ranks for some stupid stuff, right? We rank number 3 for shrug emoji, which you can imagine brings in millions of customers. Just like everybody who comes via that search term clearly cares about marketing automation software. Anyway, don't send to HubSpot. So I'm going to filter that out and basically look at what ones are relevant to my business. And that's where I was going with that. What are your priorities? So like I'm manually filtering a lot of this stuff. I may have a huge list of keywords, but it really depends on like what my strategy is, whether I'm going for the very product stuff or I'm going for the high level thought leadership stuff, what goes into my strategy. For me, I'm filtering based on like product and like very like alignment level stuff. But this is the whole process is like you're building a big list of keywords wherein eventually you can go through them and say like content marketing, how to get a Wikipedia page, video marketing, those all go on your list. But not all of them may apply to your business. If you make a content analytics platform, it makes a lot of sense to write that piece on content marketing, but it makes zero sense or very little sense to do video marketing. So I would factor that into your decision when you're filtering these keywords. But the point is, with all of this stuff, you're starting with a wide net. Essentially, it's like any brainstorming process where you're sitting in a room and I don't know if you've had the experience of having one person in there just constantly like criticize everybody's ideas and you're like, well, we're getting nowhere. We want to filter these later eventually, but it's very difficult to get any work done if you have that voice in the room that's constantly saying no before you ever get started on the filtering and the prioritization. So the process up front, for me at least, is to build as big of a backlog as I can. And maybe the keywords are relevant, maybe they're not. Eventually we're going to filter them, but I'm looking at all the competitors. I'm looking at like the secondary, tertiary companies, everybody in the space, and I'm building a huge roadmap of all the keywords that they rank for. I'm bringing that to Excel. I'm pulling in the keyword, the search volume, the difficulty, all of those things. And then I'm going to go through eventually and pick those out one by one. This is largely manual. I want to build a tool for this too eventually. But looking into like, what's the search volume? Is this worth it to us? That's usually a filtering mechanism. If we don't care about anything below 500, it's easy to do that in Excel or something. Difficulty, if we have a low domain authority site, we probably don't want to go for like 75 plus keyword difficulty terms. And basically trying to chop that list up as much as we can. But at this point, it's really about building all the keywords and trying to build that backlog up. So prioritization is the part that, that comes next. Once you have all of these keywords, what I actually do, and this was the answer to the question that I kind of mumbled around. The typical buyer's journey, as we talked about before, awareness, consideration, decision. I look at the decision stage and I use that to map out my entire process. So I think about like, what's the end state? Where do I eventually want to bring a user and how might they get there before that? It's like the reverse path analysis report in Google Analytics where you look at the goal page and which pages came before that to bring the person to that page. So if I'm building like a blockchain marketplace, then I would look at like, all right, what are the terms that would lead somebody to know that they'd want a blockchain marketplace? What's a blockchain marketplace?
It's not exactly what our product does, but it's a relevant keyword. Basically, well, if you're talking about the keyword, basically be a marketplace built on blockchain or a marketplace blockchain software.
Makes sense. Yeah. So I would basically do the reverse path analysis, whereas other teams in the past, and I think this is the traditional approach with content marketing teams, look at search volume first as a key indicator of what search terms they should go after. I'm looking the opposite way, and I'm looking to build like thematic clusters based on the last touch point before they convert. Because after all, content marketing is a business function, and we don't just want like search volume, we don't just want social shares. We want to map everything out from the bullseye outward. So yeah, basically I talked about this before, but awareness level, we're building demand, and consideration level, we're capturing demand. So this is the map that I showed you before. I'm building all these out. This is the whole roadmap that we had before. So every single keyword, and I manually put them into different categories. I look for terms like what is, how to, best. So any given keyword like that indicates that if it's best, top, or like software, like those are probably the search discovery kind of keywords where it's like looking for different solutions. If it's how to, it's somebody that knows what they want. It's just like looking into possible solutions for it. So I look at that as the in-between stage between awareness and consideration. And if it's what is, it's probably somebody who's new to the space and like you may want to not try to convert them to your product right away. But with my search strategy, I look at these first. So I'm building from the back up, and I'm looking at the core term for form builder. That's where the customer is going to actually enter our product. What keywords would lead somebody to that point? And yeah, we basically already talked about this. So once I have this roadmap built out, the important thing is to build this into a strategy or a tactical roadmap that a content team can actually execute in order. Because it really depends, like it's such an important thing to prioritize and like build out a playbook where a content team is working on the most important thing first, second most important second, and on and on down the list. So what I do is create content clusters. This is a model at HubSpot. I think we came up with this, but it's also an idea in the industry that's been around for a while. Essentially, Google, I want to say with their Penguin or Panda update, one of their algorithm updates, started to rank depth sites more than breadth sites. So that's when About.com, I think Livestrong, a bunch of sites like that tanked because they were writing a little bit about everything, whereas sites like HubSpot, which wrote a lot about marketing, started to rank more because Google started to look at them as an authority. They basically had like topical authority on a given theme. So we may not write about every marketing keyword, but there would be multiple different components there. So essentially what I do, again, looking back at that decision keyword, is start from the star, which is the product page. That's the money. That's where we're gonna like bring in customers. Branch out from there, and I think about pillar pages. So what's gonna be the key piece of content that's competitive, but it's also like a big breadwinner in terms of search traffic that might bring in a lot of awareness content. And then circled around that in a universe that's slightly related is longer tail, more like how-to content that relates to that pillar page. And that's where we get the LSI keywords and like the kind of related stuff where it's like we have a customer satisfaction ultimate guide, but we have a million different like pages we can rank around that are super long tail and probably easier to actually rank. And all of the terms are related to customer feedback. So when it comes to time to ranking that keyword for customer feedback, and we've built out an entire ecosystem of content keywords around that, we have the topical authority, and Google looks at us as an expert in customer feedback, as opposed to somebody who just writes one blog post and one product page and hopes to rank for it. We've built out sort of that expertise model. And then I also rank like multiple different subclusters together. So it's like if we're trying to do this overall search strategy for our help center and customer feedback tools and customer service software, we have multiple topic clusters and pillar pages that can fit within that model. So we have our customer satisfaction one, which I already showed you, customer feedback, but then that's sort of also related to knowledge base, help desk software, knowledge management systems. So we do internal links among all of those as well. And this is actually an example we used when we were doing our research for forums. So we did all of our product pages and our actual URL slugs that we would want to rank to. And then what I do is put them into clusters, and this is a roadmap. This is actually the roadmap we used for Wordable. So we knew we wanted to rank for content marketing tools, blog post template, and editorial calendar template. So those are things that like our customers come in for. They kind of like more bottom funnel terms. And then we knew that we had to rank several topics around that. So related to content marketing tools, it's like content creation companies, content planning tools, content curation tools. Blog post template is really somebody looking for some help with creating their stuff. So yeah, content audit template, strategy template, somebody who is a content marketer and they're already in the game and they're looking for different documents to help expedite their workflow. But these would all come from that giant roadmap, that huge backlog of keywords. I would map that out and think like, all right, what's the most like strategically important things, like the product page, the bottom funnel stuff. I would put that out first, and then I would secondarily put the pillar page out. So if, for instance, I want to rank a product page for customer feedback, I would put the pillar page second behind that. So I publish the first, like the product page that we want to rank that's going to bring in customers. And then on the roadmap, I would put the pillar page, so the customer feedback ultimate guide, and then all of the clusters behind that, basically, because they're less important in terms of traffic. So it's this descending order where it's prioritized based on business impact first and traffic second. But it's just a heuristic, like there's multiple different models. This is just how HubSpot does it and how I've done it with clients. Here's actually another client I was working with. I blurred their info out. I probably should have for Wordable, but whatever. So yeah, they have these service pages that actually have high search volume, but that's where customers are going to find them and fill out a contact form just to get in touch with them. And then they have these sub-services pages too. So it's like, let's just say they were in the translation space. Their core keyword might be translation services, which gets a lot of traffic. But then there's minor terms underneath that that could also bring in bottom funnel stuff that's related. So it's like Spanish translation services or French translation services or something like that. But then beneath that, we put the pillar page, which is like, what is business translation? I'm going through this client's like keyword roadmap. Probably shouldn't. But yeah, basically core product pages followed by like traffic pages. And actually, I put this in, latent semantic analysis. Yeah. So I put an LSI graph. So I would use that to basically like filter in like different subtopics within each blog post. Answer the public, use that as an example too. So that actually shows really great questions, because that's exactly what I had planned on showing anyway. This point, we should probably stop and discuss just like how we determine which keywords are worth ranking and which kind of, like what our strategy is for like prioritizing things. Does anybody have an interesting prioritization framework that you've developed within your company, or like, is that something you've struggled with? So I've explained a lot with how I choose keywords at HubSpot and how we do things. Is there any differences or anything that somebody would add that maybe makes more sense, or you're like, maybe HubSpot should try that?
So we don't have like a super advanced prioritizing framework. We kind of use a combination of gut feeling, logics, and probably some business insights we've carried for 40 years in the industry to determine whether or not the keyword carries an intent. So it's kind of between common sense and intuition.
Interesting. So do you do any sort of objective like with intent or traffic? Is there any sort of like weighing of the business intent versus like how much volume there is or anything like that? Or is it mostly, we think this is important because multiple customers have asked us about this?
We do track volume, but we don't consider it like the most important thing, because it's kind of, it can be like seasonal, it can change. So we consider it, but not in the first place. We try to track keywords with tools like Keyword Hero or with the Search Console that actually brings us traffic, but there's no 100% certain way to determine whether those were like exactly those people who bought the product. So this is kind of one of the things that creates the marketing suffering.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's not enough science around user intent at this point, because that's something I'm constantly trying to figure out. I was explaining in kind of a simplistic way about these best of keyword or the best product listicles that I'm working on. And in general, we've seen a lot of like high conversion rates. but then there's a whole cluster of these posts that convert very poorly. So I wonder why. It's like you would think somebody that's searching best form builder would come in and want to get a form product, and that's true. But then we did one on best help desk software, and it ranks number 5, number 4, something like that. It gets good traffic and converts really poorly. So there's always an element of surprise when it comes into what you think may be the most important business pages. But I think heuristics are important because otherwise we would just have analysis paralysis where we'd constantly be arguing about the most important thing. Is there anybody who's developed, like, with when you're doing a content roadmap, like a purely objective framework for this? Because I feel like our experience with subjectivity and gut feel is probably the more common one, where you add that element of, we think that this one's going to be more important for the business. Is there anybody here done more of an objective thing where it's purely keyword volume based or purely like CPC based or something like that? How about the other side? Is anybody purely gut feel based where you just kind of go off of like the top of your head and like what customer questions or anything like that?
Some additional point to the intent. Yeah, when you analyze keywords like you see volume, etc., and you can probably, I don't know, come up with some assumption of what is the intent behind this keyword. But that's what actually Google does and how it ranks pages.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when I'm thinking about trying to rank for a certain keyword, I go to the search and analyze all the pages that are ranked well and try to analyze what are they talking about, like exactly where are they leading to, and this way I can understand what is the intent that can probably rank well. So if the intent is, I don't know, if user searches for some informational content and you just do some promotional, probably you're not gonna rank.
Mm-hmm.
Like for this.
We actually do the exact same thing, so I'm glad you brought that up. That was something with this form builder keyword and like the top form builders article that we wrote. We tried to rank our product page for like 7 months. We couldn't do it. And finally we're like, well, what the hell ranks? And we were like, why do they rank? And we looked at it and it was all these like comparison sites. It was like G2 Crowd and Capterra and then like 6 listicles. We're like, let's just try writing one of those. And like literally next week it like went to the first page and we're like, we spent 7 months link building to our product page, and yeah, it turns out Google cares about what the searcher wants, you know? But I still have not found a way to programmatically or automatically determine user intent. Like I'm working on something where I think there's some combination of like search volume with search difficulty and CPC, and then also possibly search snippets. So I was thinking about ways to like determine, you know, if somebody cares about a list of comparisons or something like that, that a feature snippet might come up. But so far, HubSpot does the exact same thing. I basically find keywords, build like the report based on the volume and CPC, have some sort of estimate, but then we'll go in and say like what type of page it should be based on what else ranks on the top page of Google. And sometimes it's confusing. There's like a combination of 4 different types of pages and you're like, we'll just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks on this one. But yeah, I think there's always that manual question of saying like, how can we match the user intent most appropriately? Cool. Anything else on this point?
Can I ask
Mm-hmm.
you? For example, at HubSpot, we have a lot of different subjects about marketing, and we just answer some questions. How they convert to the marketing from software or HubSpot? How do you come? It's not like you try to sell something in your articles. You just answer some general marketing questions. How it can work?
How do we convert people, or how do we track the conversions?
How it happens?
Yeah, so historically, HubSpot built the inbound marketing model, right? Like that's the core claim to fame that HubSpot has, the book, Inbound Marketing. So essentially, you're mapping things out on the customer journey, writing things that people care about, and slowly and progressively turning them into fans, subscribers, and eventually they want to buy from you when it comes time to purchase. You educate them through the process. So this is the kind of core idea of inbound, is you write things that are high level, that educate a broad audience, such as what is content marketing. And then you put an offer on the page, like an ebook for the content marketing best practices by the top 20 influencers or something like that. Now they're on your email list and you nurture them. So you send like drip campaigns, and slowly they escalate with time, and you send them to another offer. And then they fill in more information. And then essentially you have like the ability to send them to your sales team as a sales qualified lead. And at that point, you basically follow up in the conversation, and I'm not a salesperson, so I don't know what they talk about, but eventually they convert. That was the old model. For us on the new model, it's basically we split. We still do the leads optimization. We still like try to convert people to ebooks, and we still try to match the user intent of a blog post. So again, like what is Instagram marketing? We're not going to sell them on our social media management platform. We're going to probably send them to an ebook, which like eventually like they learn more and more about social, and then we pitch the product at some point. But we're really trying to align intent at every step of the way and educate them more and more until eventually it culminates in sort of a product pitch. Now, sometimes that comes faster than other times. Again, if you're buying a toothbrush, you don't necessarily need to research for months and months. But if you're buying a form builder, it's like you might want to learn a little bit about like what makes a good form builder, and then eventually like you end up on one of those blog posts like the top ones, and we put a very clear product pitch. We say we have a free forms builder, we're a freemium product, so there's very low friction. So it's a very easy pitch to like send them into the product. But it's very much a process of figuring out like the customer journey, how people find and discover products. If I was like looking into a sleep ring or something like that, I would have no imagination that somebody would know this product existed without having that whole roadmap behind it. It really depends on the product, but at every stage of the way, you're trying to match that user intent. And like with the lead offer, escalate the value. So what they came in from was a search on, I don't know, top textbooks for students or something like that. But then what they sign up for, how you collect their information, you really have to escalate that value and make them say, oh, hell yeah, like I'd love to learn more about that, or like get involved with this email course or something like that. And from there, you have their info, and you can start to like map out different touch points along that journey to push them farther and farther down the line and down the funnel in terms of like signing up for your product. But yeah, kind of a roundabout way of that.
Create some good article, you think that it's expensive. I saw CPC metrics on your reports, and how do you count in this case CPC per user from your articles?
Oh no, so that's actually the CPC based on the estimation from Ahrefs. So they'll take like PPC data. I'm not sure how accurate. I think SEMrush is a little bit more accurate on that.
How do you count conversion rate?
Oh, so how do we count conversion rate?
Yeah.
Basically with events in Google Analytics. Yeah, so it depends because we have multiple different events. But this is basically, you want a good analytics setup for all this so you can actually track what's effective. HubSpot as a platform obviously has those tools. I'm not going to sell you on HubSpot. Google Analytics is free. You can set up events. So basically if somebody signs up for your email list, you can create a goal for that. Somebody signs up and like buys a product. If you're e-commerce, there's a whole e-commerce suite to Google Analytics. But basically you could build reports to say like, given the landing page somebody landed on, what's the conversion rate for like, you know, email list signups, ebook signups, and all these different things. And then you can determine, and you can actually like stack all those goals together and say,
Sign-ups, not just from articles.
oh yeah. So wait, so somebody that comes in via an article, like how many people convert, or what's the question here?
Yeah, because you pay to copywriter, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know about activity, but you just gather your customers in one place and give them information, and just after it, you convert them through some sign-ups.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's the point. And after it, you count your relations conversion rate.
Mm-hmm.
And all. To the articles, to the material, and you count customer cost.
Mm.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Is it?
Well, it really depends. Like analytics is a whole different issue because there's certain things that are easy to set up and certain things that are difficult, and there's also attribution models. So if what you want to count is based on like the first touch, so if somebody comes in via a blog post and eventually signs up, 90 days later, that's a different attribution model than somebody who signs up in the same session. So in Google Analytics, the session is based on like 30 minutes uninterrupted and basically with activity. So, and it shuts down at midnight. There's all these like inefficiencies with sessions, but based on like their core model, this is last touch attribution. So if you did this report and looked at your landing pages and the conversion rates, then you would see based on what page they landed on, did they convert in that session and at what percentage. So that's a quick way to get it. It's kind of a high stress situation or a high pressure situation to put a blog post in to convert somebody within the first time they landed, within 30 minutes. So I like a model that's more based on first touch with blog posts. So then you would put basically, this is a Google Analytics demo account, so I don't know if they have the data in here, but I would do something like this. Probably want to use your funnel. Right, so that's saying that their first touch point was on a landing page that starts with blog.hubspot.com, and then that is followed by, at any point in their customer journey, of a goal conversion rate based like greater than 0. So that's basically giving you all the time in the world to convert the user. So it's not giving the blog so much pressure that it has to convert on the first time. Does that answer that a little bit? It really, like, analytics is a whole different issue with content marketing. It becomes very complex because people are going to want different answers. So I would say, like, it really depends on the goals of each blog post. Some of them, you're going to want that last touch attribution. Product pages, that's probably the case. With something, if you just want to see like how your blog is actually like giving assisted conversions to the overall site, this is a good model with kind of a first touch attribution. But yeah, that's analytics is a whole different workshop, which I would love to give at some point. That would be super fun. Just hang out in Google Analytics. If that's good for the keyword stuff, I can talk a little bit about content creation, which again, I was saying is a separate strategy, but similar. So with content creation, with reply.io, you talked about this before. You bake content promotion into the article itself. That's, I'm guessing, the purpose of the expert roundups, because then you have all the people who are willing to share it with their audiences, and it gives you automatic distribution, right? So that's something that I think a lot of people don't do well, because they plan it out from the top down, and they think, all right, this is a great article. People should read it, and people should convert, and then it's crickets once you launch. So once you're a big site, once you have a big email list and a high, domain authority and can rank in search, that's not a problem. But when you're first starting out, you need to bake a lot of the content promotion into the process and worry much more about how you're distributing your content and how you're getting eyes on it, as opposed to the quality is important. A bad quality article is never going to do well. But if you don't have the distribution in place, a good article is going to be like that old riddle of the tree falling in the forest and nobody around to hear it. Was it a good article? Nobody knows. So what I do, back to that whole thing on building out that huge backlog of your competitors, partners, all that stuff, I build out a whole spreadsheet full of people, and I put them in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 is the top kind of like, tier 1 is the lowest. That's not, the graphic's wrong. Basically, I put them into different tiers based on the highest authority ones, which is the most important in the bullseye. I did it backwards. Anyway, I'm not good with graphics, as you can see. Design is not my forte. Bullseye is the top related. So if you are marketing automation software and you get a backlink from Marketo, that's huge. It's very unlikely, but it's one of those where it's kind of a goal, right? They're super related, super relevant. Relevancy is important in Google's eyes, but then authority, they're a high domain authority site as well. Tier 2 is less related. So if I'm selling a service software, customer service software, customer experience software is kind of related. It's in that same space, but it's not competitive. So I actually think that's the most fruitful area in terms of like people you can partner with and people you can do link building for, as people who aren't competing with you. So HubSpot, we could partner with somebody like Usabilla, because we don't make a similar product, but they're in that same marketing tech service space. And we could probably build great, co-marketing campaigns and whatnot. And then I look at tier 3 as actually being high authority. I don't go for like too many like low authority sites in general when I'm doing promotion, but like general. So this would be like Inc.com or like somewhere where it's just a very general kind of like big website that's not super related to your specific product, but something that would still be a great link from. And again, I already went through this process, but like You're going to look for competitors. You're going to look for basically a huge kind of like PR list. Another tip is to put like your competitors' URLs into Ahrefs, and you can see who links to them already. A lot of good targets for link building outreach. And then there's other solutions like BuzzSumo, which I already showed you. I like to scrape software comparison sites and see what other products exist in those categories. So if I'm selling a customer service software, I may look at customer experience and see all of the websites and the businesses that rank there or that are in that category, and look to how I can build relationships with those companies. And then if you have agency partners, integrations partners, anybody who currently works with you, I would talk to them, and then Slack groups and communities in your niche, essentially building up a huge network that already exists for you. Don't forget about communities, so Designer News, Hacker News, Reddit, etc. You're building a PR launch list. So essentially people you can reach out to for quotes, people you can reach out to look at the article before it goes live, anybody who you can count on to like help you distribute the article. Again, I think expert quotes are probably one of the best ways to do this, because not only do you get automatic distribution with the people involved, but you get better content. Like they're the domain experts, right? So doing interviews and getting those experts quotes can be a really cool way to bake in promotion. But basically it's about having a plan before you create anything. Is the GIF not working? Oh man, bummer. All right, and then this is the content creation process, which is deliberately underemphasized in this. Because I think that at a certain point, content creation is table stakes. I think you do have to create a better piece of content in the early days than your competitors, but I think that if you don't have all the strategy in place, it's not really going to do anything. There's so many stories of people writing great content and it's just going nowhere. But it still has to be good, right? Like that's to me like, you either have it or you don't. Like you're just not going to do well without good content. But when it comes to creating epic content that builds links, builds authority and all that stuff, outside of it being well written, grammatically accurate, useful, and like to a keyword that matters to you, I think that it should have hooks or link magnets or something that helps people basically share it or build links to your website, where it's not just some average piece of content. These are the things I like to bake in it. Original research, original images, organic charts, frameworks with made up names is actually my favorite one. I found that works internally too. If you ever want to like build an idea or a strategy and you name it something silly that people remember, it goes way farther. So tomorrow I'll be talking about my surround sound strategy. It works. Quotes from experts, again, we've talked about that before. And then pros and cons tables. So just real quick examples of each of these. It's like original images are probably the lowest effort thing you can do. But like other bloggers are always looking to link to other images. So if you can create these yourselves, they kind of have to like cite you for them. Or you can follow up and be like, hey, maybe link to that image source. And that's an easy way to build links. Data and research is probably one of the most important things, but the hardest things to do. All bloggers are looking for new statistics. So if you can like find marketing statistics or account-based marketing statistics, anything like that, people are always citing those things because we want to appear data-driven. So HubSpot is really good at that. And this is a report we used to do for Conversion Excel on the state of the industry. Every year we would put one out. Data viz, charts, people love citing these things. Again, bloggers want to look data-driven, so putting charts always works. And then, yeah, again, my favorite one, new frameworks with made-up names. Back to Brian Dean, he created the skyscraper technique, which now everybody refers to as a skyscraper technique. But if you take his course, he also has another tactic there. I think it's called something like the framework technique. He branded a framework talking about branding frameworks. It just works, Quotes from experts, that's a CRO influencer, Justin Rondo. We used to bake this into like almost all of our content at CXL. And I'm trying to operationalize that at HubSpot too, where we get more and more like influencers and experts creating the content with us. Pros and cons, comparing stuff, making it easier for people to actually like look at products and different things. Let's talk about publication, launching and promoting. How much time do we have in terms of?
Around 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good for the next couple sections. Just about done here. Yeah, so once you publish, all the hard work is pretty much out of the way. You've already got your PR launch list. You've created the great content. It's on a keyword that you care about. and now it's just about launching it. So this is an article that I wrote, launched it, published it, and then when it comes to promo, I believe that you need a two-faceted approach where it's like short-term plus long-term. You want that short-term spike, you want to bring in initial users, you want to get those backlinks, those industry people linking to you, but really my goal is a long-term piece of content. Whether it's something people bookmark as like a strategic thing, so if it's like some sort of a white paper or a framework, something like the skyscraper technique. Nobody had that keyword. That was never on anybody's like keyword roadmap because it didn't exist. But that's a piece of content that now everybody refers to, so now it's a long-term thing. Or if it's just an SEO keyword that you care about getting that long-term traffic. So the short term, I think, is mostly social, community, and email. It's like those little spikes there. I post shit on Growth Hackers all the time, basically communities that I'm involved with, Slack groups, reply.io, and it does too. I always see the stuff there. I have a little email list I always send emails to. It's funny, whenever I publish at HubSpot, the email list is so huge that my Twitter blows up for a day. I write these like little listicles and it's just like 40 notifications. I was like, all right. So email lists can be an incredibly powerful long-term kind of moat that you can build out where it's like an owned audience where you don't have to rely on Google's algorithm or Facebook's sharing algorithm or something like that. It's something that you own. Always tweet it, share it. Long-term SEO plus links. This is the important stuff. I don't know if it might be my website. I don't know. I forgot what I put there. Yeah, so I do link building, not as much anymore. We have a whole influencer and link building team at HubSpot. And I guess like for smaller sites that I'm working with, like clients, like we still do link building pretty heavily. But it's something that you can kind of taper off as your site gets bigger and bigger. I've actually never talked to a company or like a marketing department that doesn't do link building that's successful with content. So like Canva, HubSpot, even though we're huge sites, we still have link building people. So that's kind of an industry secret, is like nobody really talks about that, but it still takes a lot of effort to rank product pages and stuff like that. So link building, I don't think is gonna die out anytime soon. Email outreach, really quickly, I just wanna say, like when you're sending these emails, just talk normal. I think so many people like overthink it and they write these like quirky, like, hey, I was stumbling upon your website and like blah, blah, blah. Like, I'd love for you to check out this resource. For me, like I get a lot of link building requests and the best ones are direct. They're saying like, hey, I like your stuff. Would love if I'd get a link for this. Happy to like do a guest post in exchange or work with you somehow. And then they follow up a couple times. And usually if it's a company I'd like to work with, I respond. But essentially asking like, what's in it for me? So sending that and being like, they're not just gonna give me a link or like any favor if they don't know me. What's in it for them? And then just talking normal and not beating around the bush. That's my core thing with email outreach, is just like sounding like a normal person, talking like you're a human, you know? It's rare that people actually do that though. I feel like it's the minority of outreach that I get. But for the most part, one of the biggest investments you can make in content marketing is relationships. So going to conferences and hanging out in Slack groups and just meeting general people. Because now my link building outreach looks like this. It's just ridiculous to the point. I know the people so well. I know they're gonna do it. I always get positive responses. So I don't put a lot of effort into cold outreach anymore. It's just been a flywheel of sorts, if you will, of building up that network. And now it's easier to do. It's a slog in the beginning. What do you think about promotion? We haven't discussed that. So I do have more content on like website analytics and data, but I think that's actually less important to talk about. It's almost a different thing. So if we don't get to that.
How do you manage your time to be, engaged in those communities you're sharing links? So if you're not there and you're going to share some link, especially if you don't have a name yet, it's going to be hard to get some results out of it. How do you manage it? Resources that were
Right, so I would look at killing two birds with one stone. So communities that you can learn about your customers in are probably important just from a research perspective. So those are places where you can find people answering questions, doing interesting stuff. Here's an example. If you're in analytics, you can look at the Measure Slack, right? And that's a place where people actually promote their content as well. So this is actually, if you're interested in analytics, an incredible Slack group. But they have conferences. If you're in Google Analytics, you can answer questions. So something like this, if you're in that space and you want to sell to these people, it's probably important that you know what they're talking about anyway. So this is like customer research at its core. But then, if you want to publish a blog post, you can just put it here, and you're going to get some likes and shares and kind of comments and stuff like that. So I would look at it as part of your job and not just like a tack on that you do for promotion. Because also if you're just doing it for promotion, like people smell it out instantly. I'm in a couple groups and I'm guilty of this where I just pop in every once in a while and share an article, and I kind of feel bad, but it doesn't work also. It's just like people kind of call you out. And communities that don't call you out are usually garbage anyway. So if you want to actually become a part of a community, I would be judicious about it, choose the right ones, and actually look at it like it's part of your job. I used to, when I was at Conversion Excel, I would cut out 20, 30 minutes of my day and reply to comments and growth hackers and the Slack groups that I'm in. Yeah, so I would just look at it as like a multi-purpose tool where you're not just doing promotion, you're learning things, you're building your name in the industry, you're learning about customers, and I don't know. I would do it when you're like less productive. I usually do it after lunch. It's kind of a procrastination thing for me. Any other things on promotion? Does everybody do content promotion?
Do you use Facebook ads or other social media ads?
Yes, but that's not my team. HubSpot has a whole paid acquisition team with a ton of budget, and they do a lot of, well, actually we do a lot more with lead magnets. So we'll do promos for like our ebooks and webinars and stuff. I don't know that we've done a lot with content. That's something I'd want to look into though, now that we're publishing these directories and top form builders, because they're more bottom of the funnel content, and we can get a bigger like, or like a lower cost of acquisition with those. With our content, it's a little tricky just because it's so high level oftentimes. I just don't know how you can target like a, what is marketing automation post very easily and like expect people to convert after reading it the first time. But I think paid is becoming more and more popular. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have a question about the communities of like boring industries. For example, software development. Well, those people hang out. People in the software development hang out. But people who hang out in some communities, groups, Slack channels, they're mostly developing software. So people who want to order software for their company, usually they don't really hang out in groups like discussing those things, like most of them. So what could be a solution?
I would look to where the communities are that the buyers hang out in. And there's always a place, like whether it's online or in person, like there's always a place people hang out. Any given industry usually has as a niche. Even if it's like consumer, if it's paleo people, there's Paleo FX conference in Austin. There's always something like that. Whether it's small or large, the marketing community happens to be bigger and more enthusiastic because we're all online nerds and we're just in Slack groups and stuff like that. We build communities, but there's always a place, and it's more about defining like your end user and like who actually like, or not end user, but like the buyer and the decision maker, and finding out where they hang out. It's more like researching that and kind of like really defining that kind of buyer persona. Because I understand that point. That's definitely a case where it's like maybe your end users are nerdy and like they're not sharing articles and all that stuff. So
Discussing software. I mean, they use software, they order software, but it's not like they really discuss software. Yeah, they may hang out on some groups, but they would be about their industry. It's not connected.
you also, so you don't need to do communities. There's oftentimes like more or less fruitful industries for that. Again, marketing tech is kind of a fruitful space for communities. There's multiple different avenues you can go down for content promotion. Some of it's link building, outreach. There's many different tactics. In this document, I give a resource on content marketing tactics, like all of them that I wrote about. I think I did. Yeah, so I'll send the slides out. That's probably a good place to start. But what I like to do is test different channels and find the efficacy and how well each one's doing versus the effort to put in. In my experience, just with marketing tech, with clients, HubSpot, all that stuff, my highest ROI has been communities. That's not going to be the case with every industry. So it's really a matter of like mapping out all the possible channels and techniques, trying them and seeing what sticks, and then kind of doubling down on that.
Okay. What is your experience with Quora for link building?
With Quora?
Yeah, Quora.
I want to invest more time in that because we actually did an analysis recently and found we actually do have quite a few referrals from Quora that turn into customers. We've never, to my understanding at HubSpot, I don't know if there's a team that has worked on this. To my understanding, we have never actually put time and effort and a strategic process into Quora. So I think that, I would say, is on our future roadmap, because that's actually another area where people are going for buying decisions. That's where somebody's asking a question like what's better, Marketo or HubSpot? And that's where we actually do need to be. So I'll admit ignorance and say I don't have the answer on that one, but I think it's a fruitful area. And I think, yeah, if you're serious about especially like bottom funnel decisions, Quora is probably a good place to be. I've also seen really interesting like examples of people building up like influencer profiles on there, like where they become like the most read Quora author. I know nothing about it, but I think it's an interesting space.
Do you promote on Reddit?
On Reddit? That's another one where I don't do very well. But I used to at LawnStarter. I don't want to say this on camera, but afterwards, like, talk to me about that, and I'll tell you some cool Reddit stuff I did at LawnStarter.
Okay.
Another question. If you were about to start link building strategy, would you invest time in platforms such as Quora, Reddit, or would you rather just promote the content on Facebook groups, community groups? For example, we are a tour company.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a tour marketplace, so it's travel related, and well, it's quite a broad topic, you know. It's about destinations, so all our content is related to a certain destination, and we're not quite sure about where to start with link building because it's a broad topic.
Well, I think link building and communities are a different thing, right? So communities are going to build you a little bit of short-term traffic and possibly influencers in the space. Link building, I would look to the biggest publications in that city or like whatever country or like wherever you're located for the tours, and look to build almost local SEO links.
Worldwide.
Oh, it's worldwide.
Countries, so it's
Oof.
tours in so many countries.
But is it something where people search like tours in?
Yeah, free tours.
Okay, so you're really dealing with the process of local SEO. So I would look at that completely differently. And when it comes to your content promotion, I think all of those channels are viable. I always look at Reddit and Quora as more bottom funnel and also more, well, Quora is not so much, but Reddit's tougher to break into. People are more skeptical on there. Facebook communities seem like a very fruitful spot for that. There feels like there's a lot of travel communities on Facebook. I'm part of a couple, so I think that would be an easier place to break into. Reddit, if you go on there and start promoting your stuff, is going to just like shut you down immediately. You're just gonna, you really have to like have a cohesive strategy there, and you know, people that can like vouch for you, and like if you come in and just promote your stuff, it's not going to do very well. So I would just test it, you know, test the different channels and see what ones pick up steam, which ones don't work at all, and kind of double down on the ones that do. Just from my experience, like travel and Quora wouldn't maybe make as much sense. That seems to be more software. Well, I don't know, actually. What do I know? Reddit and Facebook would seem to be the biggest channels there. But whatever's the easiest to break into. And I mean, what do you enjoy like spending time in? Like if you don't want to do Reddit, like I wouldn't try to do the uphill battle of like learning the system and building your profile. And like if you already have a Facebook presence and you enjoy those communities, I would start there, low-hanging fruit.
You said like communities about more subjects. Communities where people hang out, but you know, where people hang out, they don't buy from there, or okay, your topics, the hanging out topics, they have high quality, but it's very difficult to learn from them.
So you sell to students, right?
Yeah.
All right. After this, let's talk, because I have another Facebook thing with students that I was working on with LawnStarter. Again, I don't want to say it on camera, but a really cool strategy that we did for Facebook communities with like different college universities. So there's a really cool way to break into those, and I think it still exists. There's ways for all of this stuff. It just, you know, it's figuring out the rules of the system. I always liken it to like a book club, like where if you, there's a book club that existed for many years, and you know, they've got their protocols and rules, and they're reading a book, and you just come in and plop like Atlas Shrugged down on a table, and you're like, fuck yeah, Atlas Shrugged. They're like, who are you? Like, do you know, you didn't introduce yourself, you didn't talk about the books we're currently discussing, you just came in and like talked about your thing. That's the same that we see often in communities, is you come in and you just like throw your stuff all over, and it's like who are you, you know? So you've got to acquaint yourself with the rules of the community first. Anything else on promo? We're about at time, but I'm just gonna like cover the little last section here. It's just on analytics and optimization. So we already talked about updating old posts, so we don't need to go too far into that. Really the core thing, we actually talked about analytics a little bit too. The core thing is just to measure a couple things, just to make sure you're doing all this correctly and can optimize over time. Traffic and click-stream data, so that's your Google Analytics, amplitude, whatever you can track like for on-site metrics. And then you want your rank tracking and SEO. There's things like AccuRanker just to see like what position you are, Ahrefs, Google Search Console, a million tools in this space. You just want to see like what position you're at, how much traffic it's bringing in, what keywords are out there. And then goal tracking and conversion data. So that often exists in your marketing platform. If you're using HubSpot, Marketo, Intercom, you can get that data. Otherwise, I also like to build my own like databases and basically have that all data owned myself. But in a nutshell, you want to know how much traffic is coming to your site, what rank you are, how you can improve that, and what conversions are coming. Those are kind of the three core things you're going to need to make decisions. So web traffic, Google Analytics, SEO and rank tracking, Search Console, Ahrefs, SEMrush. You can do Data Studio and also port in data through like search Supermetrics or something like that, which is actually a really good way to blend your data from all these sources. And then SEO and rank tracking data, I have to say, I love Ahrefs. It's one of my favorite tools that I like am in every day, so I have to plug their tool all the time. And then, yeah, just got all this homework here. So we talked about content optimization very briefly. The two things you can do are look at almost ranking content, which I already showed you in Ahrefs, stuff from page 11 or page 2 onto like 5, and how you can like increase the rankings. And then conversions on low ranking content, which I also already talked about, where you like plug in your URL and find what keywords people are coming via, and like matching the search intent to like the offer on page. So yeah, actually like the questions I feel like covered a lot of the later stuff I was planning on doing anyway. So almost ranking content, low hanging fruit, how to optimize it, write a new post for that keyword. I think that was your question on like when do you write a new post? So that could be an option if it's something that completely doesn't rank within the top 50. You might just add link magnets and beef up the content. So add like images, charts, expert quotes, add 2 paragraphs, relaunch it to your email list and pretend it's new. Or just rework the title and content to focus on the new keyword and relaunch. And then high traffic, low converting content, Google Analytics. Quick way to do that. Really can't dive deep into this. I have a couple articles in the resources section, but you go into this report where it's landing page, conversion rate, and you sort by comparison. So it shows you above or below average converting things. So you can filter by your blog posts and show like which are the highest and lowest converting ones. All the low converting ones, focus on those and find out why they're not converting so high. Or your marketing tool like HubSpot, other analytics solutions. And yeah, I mean, this part is basically, it could be another whole workshop, which again, I would love to do. It's like conversion optimization. Like how do you process-wise walk through your posts and like the pages on your site and figure out why they're not converting, run experiments to actually make them convert better, iterate, repeat, grow forever. And that's the CRO process. But yeah, I mean, that's the gist of it. And I'd love to answer questions later, like chat with you guys. And I also, I don't know if we're emailing the slides out, but if not, I can send you a deck and just email me with some sort of growth marketing stage title or something like that. And I am happy to talk about this stuff anytime.